Chapter 617. To suddenly see one's past life in an impossible place was undoubtedly a very frightening thing. However, when Chu Xiu wanted to take a closer look, the appearance of the black-robed figure on the white bone throne became blurred again, as though what he saw before was an illusion. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes. Everything was very wrong. Regardless of whether what he saw was an illusion or not, the scene in front of him was very wrong. Previously, Wuxia had given him information about the Devil Sky Realm. In the Devil Sky Realm, there should only be a great hall where Dugu Weiwei cultivated in seclusion. In the great hall, there should be some handwritten notes of Dugu Weiwei during his cultivation, and even some traces that he had casually drawn. Although those traces were casually drawn by Dugu Weiwei, for other warriors, these traces were priceless treasures. Many warriors could comprehend some things from these traces. What exactly was it that Chu Xiu was looking at? Why was what he saw different from others? At this moment, even an idiot could feel that Chu Xiu was connected to Dugu Weiwei. However, Chu Xiu couldn't figure out where the connection was. He didn't dare to think too much about it, because it was very frightening to think about it. In the original plot, Chu Xiu's current body was the devil cult leader who restored the Kunlun devil cult, which was equivalent to Dugu Weiwei's successor. Moreover, it only took him 20 years to reach this stage, which was very shocking. Whether Chu Xiu in this life could reach the achievements of his previous life, Chu Xiu himself didn't know. However, in the original plot, did Chu Xiu obtain the true inheritance of Dugu Weiwei to reach this stage, or was it because of something else? Could it be that he was walking the same path as in his previous life, and the plot had returned to the right track due to a freak combination of factors? Could it be that he could obtain the inheritance of Dugu Weiwei? After all, those people from the hidden devil lineage said that the Devil Sky Realm had Dugu Weiwei's inheritance. However, the figure on the white bone throne he saw was exactly the same as in his previous life. What was going on? The more Chu Xiu thought about it, the more chaotic his mind became. All kinds of thoughts came one after another, as if there was a kind of power eroding Chu Xiu's will. Gritting his teeth, Chu Xiu performed the heart demon rotation technique and the soul extinguishing technique at the same time, trying to stabilize his mind, but it didn't work at all. These two extremely powerful primordial spirit mystic arts could suppress mental strength, but right now, it was not Chu Xiu's mind that was in chaos, but his heart. At this moment, a strange power suddenly came from Chu Xiu's space secret box. Chu Xiu subconsciously opened the space secret box, and a stone slab suddenly floated out. Finally, it shattered, and a strange rhythm surged into Chu Xiu's body, finally suppressing Chu Xiu's chaotic mind. Chu Xiu took a deep breath. He remembered this thing. This stone slab was a stone slab that he took out from the heaven-reaching tower, and on it was a sentence of divination: "Heaven's fate is not defeated, the demon lord will not die." At that time, Chu Xiu suspected that this thing was related to Dugu Weiwei, because although there were many demonic path overlords in the ancient times, there was no demon lord who unified the demonic path and suppressed the world. And after 10,000 years, the only one who could be worthy of this sentence was Dugu Weiwei. However, the heaven-reaching tower was built 10,000 years ago, so how could the people of the heaven-reaching martial sect 10,000 years ago predict people 10,000 years later? This was also a mystery, but at that time, no one cared about it. Only Chu Xiu felt that this stone slab seemed to have some connection with him, so he kept it. He didn't expect that it would come in handy today, although Chu Xiu was still confused and didn't know what was going on. At this time, Chu Xiu looked at the figure sitting on the white bone throne. This is the undefeatable demon Lord Dugu Weiwei? The almost invincible Dugu Weiwei? What is the connection between me and Dugu Weiwei? At this time, the figure sitting on the white bone throne suddenly stood up, looked at Chu Xiu below, and revealed a trace of a smile that was unpredictable and contained countless emotions. That's right, until now, Chu Xiu couldn't see Dugu Weiwei's face as it was still a blur, but he could feel that Dugu Weiwei was smiling at him. He could see him. This scene instantly caused Chu Xiu to be horrified. Because previously he thought that this was just an image left by Dugu Weiwei in the past, something used for inheritance. When the strength of some experts reached a certain level, even if they didn't specialize in spiritual secret techniques, It was very easy to leave such an image. But Chu Xiu had never heard that the image actually had a consciousness and could see people. Although it was also possible that when Dugu Weiwei left this image, he looked down, but Chu Xiu had a feeling that Dugu Weiwei was looking at him, smiling at him. But before Chu Xiu could react, the surrounding scene had already changed. The white bone throne disappeared, and below it was a giant steel city. This giant steel city was built in the middle of a valley, and it looked extremely majestic. Huge crossbows were placed on top of the city gate tower, and there was also a large group of warriors wearing battle armor, holding weapons in their hands, standing on top of the city gate tower, filled with an iron-blooded and austere aura. A large flag was erected on top of the city gate tower, and the 3 words, Iron Emperor Castle, were written on it. Dugu Weiwei's figure hovered in midair. He pointed at Chu Xiu, and then pointed at himself, meaning to take a closer look. At this time, within the giant steel city, a person shrouded in golden battle armor stepped through the air. On his back was a long spear, halberd, gold-plated phoenix wing drum, and a total of 9 long weapons. In his hand was a green dragon crescent blade, which he slashed towards Dugu Weiwei. Dugu Weiwei stretched out his hand, and a strange curved blade appeared in his hand. It was an extremely beautiful curved blade, with a pitch-black hilt, as if it was forged from demonic qi, but the blade was as resplendent as a full moon, illuminating the ages. This was an extremely resplendent and beautiful divine weapon, dazzling and dazzling. If it wasn't in Dugu Weiwei's hand, no one would believe that this was actually a demonic blade stained with countless amounts of blood. As Dugu Weiwei's blade slashed down, space and time seemed to stop under this blade. Like a mirror, the armored person and the space around him were sealed in the mirror. As Dugu Weiwei's blade slashed down, the mirror shattered. The void cracked, and the mirror shattered. The person sealed in the mirror also let out an angry roar, but it was of no use. His seemingly gorgeous battle armor began to crack along with the mirror, and so did his body. Finally, with a loud bang, he dissipated into nothingness. Chu Xiu's eyes widened as he watched this scene. This should be the scene when Dugu Weiwei suppressed the entire pugilistic world, and when he destroyed the enemy forces. Although this blade didn't have a majestic scene of the heavens collapsing and the earth sinking, it was terrifying enough to make people shudder. For a power to be able to stand against the Kunlun demon sect, one could easily imagine how strong they were. This man who was clad in battle armor and had 9 weapons on his back was clearly an expert. But in the end, he was easily killed by a single slash from Dugu Weiwei. One could very well imagine how much power was contained in that single slash. However, the crux of the problem was that Chu Xiu couldn't understand it. What did Dugu Weiwei mean just now? Did he want Chu Xiu to see himself or to see his attack? Right now, Chu Xiu did see it, but his realm was too far away from Dugu Weiwei's realm. It could be said that the difference between them was like the clouds and the mud. Even if the current Chu Xiu were to see it a few hundred times, he still wouldn't be able to understand it. At this moment, there were changes in the Iron Emperor Castle below. Seeing that person die tragically under Dugu Weiwei's blade, a series of mechanical sounds came from within the Iron Emperor Castle. The mechanisms on the steel giant castle changed. Strange and complicated mechanisms quickly extended, covering the entire Iron Emperor Castle, leaving only the exit of the crossbow bolts open. At this moment, the Iron Emperor Castle looked like a huge steel castle. It looked incomparably sturdy. In the next moment, countless crossbow bolts burst out, attacking Dugu Weiwei. Moreover, these crossbow bolts weren't ordinary crossbow bolts. They were all inscribed with formation patterns, carrying different attributes and powers. Some had flames, some had frost. Dugu Weiwei took a step in the void, and in an instant, countless ripples bloomed. As the void trembled, the crossbow bolts all trembled and finally fell to the ground. Looking at the Iron Emperor Castle, Dugu Weiwei put away his devil blade and gently waved his hand. Countless devil qi condensed in his hand, turning into the shape of a bow. At the same time, the devil qi transformed into 2 arms. One held the bow, while the other 3 held the bowstring. As the bow was pulled to a full moon, a black arrow condensed in the void. As Dugu Weiwei shot out this arrow, everything in its path was destroyed. Even the energy of heaven and earth was minced into nothingness, leaving behind a deathly stillness in the area. As the black arrow fell, it was like a drop of ink falling into water. The blackness began to spread, and the destruction began to spread. The seemingly incomparably sturdy Iron Emperor castle started to crumble under Duguwewa's arrow. When the black cracks spread throughout the entire Iron Emperor castle, a loud bang rang out, and the entire Iron Emperor castle directly shattered, transforming into countless metal fragments that fluttered in the air. In an instant, there was no sign of life. A single arrow destroyed an extremely sturdy iron castle covered in mechanical formations. This arrow of Duguwewe was extremely shocking. However, the problem was that Chu Xiu still couldn't understand it. Since entering the Devil Sky realm, everything that had happened was too bizarre and there were too many mysteries. Chu Xiu had no time to digest it. However, it was okay to not think about these unexplainable things for the time being. Now, the saber and arrow that Duguwewe used were definitely extremely powerful martial skills. Moreover, it was like a reenactment of the scene being displayed in front of Chu Xiu. This was definitely a great opportunity. Not to mention anything else, as long as he could comprehend a similar form, it would be enough to be a trump card for the current Chu Xiu. However, he couldn't even understand it, which was very embarrassing. Chapter 6:18. It was normal for warriors in the pugilistic world to gain some insights from watching experts fight. Chu Xiu had once observed Chen Qingdi's moves and realized that it was similar to Chen Qingdi's fist intent. Chu Xiu was confused about everything in the Devil Sky territory, but he knew that if he could learn this saber and arrow, it would definitely be of great benefit. Therefore, at this moment, Chu Xiu's Heaven's Sun gazing at air skill was exerted to the extreme. Karma changed, and his mind kept replaying the saber and arrow that Duguwewe had used before. He began to break down the essence of their power one by one. Whether it was useful or not, and whether he could understand it, Chu Xiu could only use the Heaven's Sun gazing at air skill to forcibly imprint it in his mind. His mental strength was consumed crazily like flowing water, but he still couldn't understand it. The gap between the realms was too huge. At this moment, the Taoist connotation that Chu Xiu hadn't refined before suddenly began to break down and turned into a strange rhythm, combining with the Heaven's Sun gazing at air skill. The Heaven's Sun gazing at air skill was a standard Taoist technique that observed heaven and earth and looked at karma. The power of the Taoist connotation was released and integrated into the Heaven's Sun gazing at air skill, making up for the consumption of Chu Xiu's mental strength. The two martial arts skills that he couldn't understand previously, after being broken down by the Heaven's Sun gazing at air skill, gave Chu Xiu a very strange feeling. Of course, Chu Xiu still couldn't understand it. No matter how strong the Heaven's Sun gazing at air skill was, it couldn't directly analyze martial arts that were a few levels higher than Chu Xiu's. However, with the support of the Taoist connotation, the Heaven's Sun gazing at air skill was like a painting. The traces of the saber and arrow were completely imprinted in the bottom of Chu Xiu's heart and would never be forgotten. The power of Taoist connotation poured out like running water. Chu Xiu was completely immersed in that strange feeling. At this time, he did not know that everything around him began to collapse gradually, like a canvas soaked in water, losing its color. Duguwewe floated in the air and looked at Chu Xiu. There was no expression on his blurry face. There were only two spots of light shining like a pair of eyes. But in the end, they turned into a black dot and dissipated into nothingness. Everything around him dissipated in the void, and Chu Xiu himself was immersed in the strange rhythm of the combination of the Heaven's Sun gazing at air technique and Taoist connotation, and he was unable to extricate himself. Heaven's Sun gazing at air was very difficult to cultivate. Although using Heaven's Sun gazing at air required powerful mental strength, a powerful mental strength did not mean that Heaven's Sun gazing at air was powerful. Only by comprehending it could one improve Heaven's Sun gazing at air. After such a long time, most of Chu Xiu's cultivation methods had actually been cultivated to the peak realm, and even the fast and slow 9 words formulas had been combined into 9 seals. However, the cultivation of Heaven's Sun gazing at air was still stagnant. This time, by chance, heaven's sun gazing at air consumed the Taoist connotation, and at the same time, Chu Xiu's cultivation of heaven's sun gazing at air advanced a step further. At this time, in the outside world, Chu Wuji stood behind Wei Shuya and transmitted his voice. "Senior Wei, how much do you think Chu Xiu will obtain in there?" Wei Shuya said, "You have also entered the Devil Heaven realm before. Won't you know the difference between you and Chu Xiu when you were in the oneness of heaven and man realm?" Chu Wuji shook his head and said, "If we compare it like this, it will be a blow to my confidence. In the past, I was arrogant when I was young, and my understanding of martial arts and the way of dealing with people were childish and shallow, far from what I am now. Back then, I only studied some of the words left by the sect master and had some superficial understanding of the application of devil chi. Now that I think about it, it is a bit of a loss. If I enter the Devil Heaven realm after stepping into the martial arts Grandmaster realm, I guess I will be able to comprehend more things." In the past, Chu Wuji was ranked 5th on the Longhu leaderboard. After joining the Hidden Devil clan, he did many things for the clan, and with Wei Shuya's support, he was able to enter the Devil Heaven realm for 6 hours. Now, if he wanted to enter the Devil Heaven realm again, it would be extremely difficult. Just look at Chu Xiu. There were many people queuing up to enter the Devil Heaven realm, and the other big shots of the Hidden Devil clan would not allow him to enter the Devil Heaven realm twice. "Time's up, let Lin Yi come out," someone said. Wei Shuya nodded, and everyone activated the formation together. The door appeared again, and Chu Xiu was thrown out, and the radiance of the formation dissipated. Standing in the center, Chu Xiu shook his head. At this moment, Chu Xiu was still in a daze, and he had lost the concept of time. 12 hours had passed so quickly? Wei Shuya walked down the high platform and patted Chu Xiu. "What are you thinking about? Let's go." Wei Shuya was not in a hurry to ask what Chu Xiu had obtained in the Devil Heaven realm. There were many people here, and not everyone from the Hidden Devil clan was of one mind. It was better to talk about some things in secret. After leaving the secret realm, Wei Shuya brought Chu Wuji and Chu Xiu into a secret manner and sent the others away. Then he asked Chu Xiu, "Chu Xiu boy, how much did you gain in there?" Chu Xiu hesitated for a moment, and he did not know if he should tell Wei Shuya the truth. After all, it was too unusual for ordinary people. However, after thinking about it, Chu Xiu was prepared to tell him about the vision, but he had to hide some things. For example, he saw Dugu Weiwei as himself in his previous life, and Chu Xiu was not sure if he had seen it wrongly. There was also the strange connection between the image of Dugu Weiwei and himself, and the Devil Lord's immortal slate. These things were related to Chu Xiu's own secrets, and he did not intend to tell them. In fact, Chu Xiu had a lot of trust in Wei Shuya. This old man was one of the oldest in the demonic Dao. In fact, he was the one who truly considered the entire demonic Dao. He was not like the other big shots of the demonic Dao, who were more or less selfish. As long as Chu Xiu did not show any malice towards the Hidden Devil clan, Wei Shuya would definitely support him wholeheartedly. Apart from Wei Shuya, Master Tam Yuan could also be counted as such, but in the end, Chu Xiu still lied to him. Of course, Chu Xiu would only feel a little guilty, but his conscience would not hurt. In his opinion, Master Tam Yuan's inheritance would be given to someone like Li Yuan, rather than Master Tam Yuan's inheritance. However, some things were related to Chu Xiu's deepest secrets. Not to mention these seniors who had a good relationship with him, Chu Xiu did not intend to tell even his close relatives. Of course, Chu Xiu did not have any close relatives now. After sorting out his words, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I did not see those things that you told me. I only saw an image of Patriarch Dugu. In that image, Patriarch Dugu was fighting with a force called the Iron Emperor Castle. He killed an expert of the Iron Emperor Castle with one saber strike, then condensed a bow and arrow, and shot the Iron Emperor Castle. These two martial skills were too powerful, so after seeing them, I only had a superficial understanding and could not use them at all." "That's right, Senior Wei. Did this scene really exist in the past?" Wei Shuya and Chu Wuji, who had always been calm, were shocked by Chu Xiu's words. "What did you say? You actually saw the image left behind by Patriarch Dugu?" Although all the martialists who had entered the Devil Sky realm were aiming for Dugu Weiwa's inheritance, they knew that it was almost impossible to do so. Therefore, they could only hope to gain some superficial comprehension from the Devil Heaven realm. In the end, Chu Xiu entered the Devil Sky realm and actually saw the image left behind by Dugu Weiwei. Could the legend be true? Those who entered the Devil Sky realm did not have any reaction. Was it purely because they did not have enough potential or fortuitous encounters? Wei Xia calmed himself down and looked at Chu Xiu with a peculiar gaze. Great fortune, it's a great fortune. The image left behind by Patriarch Dugu is almost no different from an inheritance. Moreover, what you saw should be Patriarch Dugu's unique martial skills, the Misty Mortal Slash and the Triple City Extinguishing Arrow, also known as the Arrow of Destruction or Shiva's Arrow. What you saw was real. It was something that happened in the early days of my Kunlun Devil cult. The Iron Emperor Castle was also a top power in the pugilistic world. It was proficient in mechanical formations, weapon forging, and body tempering techniques. It was very powerful, and the Iron Emperor Castle was said to be invincible even with a 1,000,000-strong army. You can see the Iron Emperor Castle as the combination of the Black Tortoise Gate, the Divine Weapon Pavilion, and half of the Great Radiance Temple. Back then, the Iron Emperor Castle killed one of my Kunlun Devil cult's devil envoys and spoke arrogant words against my Kunlun Devil cult. Patriarch Dugu personally came and beheaded the Iron Emperor Castle's Lord Tai Chinjun with one blade. He destroyed the Iron Emperor Castle, which was said to be invincible with one arrow. The weapon that the cult master used was my Kunlun Devil cult's supreme devil weapon, called the Small Building Listens to the Spring Rain in One Night. Together with Patriarch Dugu's Misty Mortal Slash, it became Small Building Listens to the Spring Rain in One Night, Devil Blade Misty Mortal Slash. It was said that apart from Ning Xuanji, no one could block Patriarch Dugu's Devil Blade and Misty Mortal Slash. This poem was the strongest killing move in the pugilistic world back then. As for the Triple Link City Destruction Arrow, it was obtained by sect leader Dugu from a foreign sect. That sect was said to be related to the Buddhism sect. It was also very powerful, not inferior to the Taoist and Buddhist sections. That sect came from the outer domain and wanted to enter the central plains to preach. But before the Taoist and Buddhist sects could react, that sect offended the Kunlun Devil cult and was attacked by the cult master, who killed all the experts in the sect. The Triple City Extinguishing Arrow was obtained from that sect. Legend has it that it was the bow and arrow of one of the three main gods worshipped by the sect, the god of destruction, Shiva. It had once destroyed the Triple City built by the Azura clan with one arrow, so it was called the Triple City Extinguishing Arrow. In the past, that sect had to worship Shiva with blood and chi in exchange for the main god's power to use this arrow. But to the cult master, even the ancestors of the devil path were not qualified to be worshipped by him. So if it was the cult master, he could directly turn into Shiva and use this arrow. Chapter 619. The images left behind by Dugu Weiwei were images of him at his peak when he used his two strongest martial arts. It was a great opportunity, a great fortune. However, when Chu Xiu thought of all the strange things that happened in Devil Sky territory, as well as all the secrets related to himself, Chu Xiu couldn't be happy even if he obtained such a great fortune. On the contrary, Wei Xia said excitedly, "Three-city extinguishing arrow is fine. Although this martial art was created by Patriarch Dugu, its origin is above that sect. However, the ethereal red dust slash is one of the secret martial techniques of High Priestess Dugu. Now that you have obtained the ethereal red dust slash, from today onwards, you are High Priestess Dugu's true successor. Your status will even be higher than it is now." However, Wei Xia shook his head and said, "However, you better not use the Misty Mortal Slash for the time being and expose the things you obtained in Devil Sky territory. The hearts of the hidden devil lineage have changed. Even if you obtain these things, the entire hidden devil lineage will not bow down to you and treat you as the true inheritor of Kunlun Devil cult. Therefore, the most important thing for you now is to accumulate strength. As long as you have enough strength, this identity will be the icing on the cake, and it will be perfectly justifiable. It doesn't matter if you don't have this identity, no one will compete with you anyway. Wei Shia was very clear about Chu Xiu's situation. However, he had never thought of obtaining the Misty Mortal Slash or Three-City Extinguishing Arrow, and the same was true for Chu Wuji. Neither of them were short-sighted people. Moreover, since this thing was left behind by Dugu Weiwei for Chu Xiu, once the images dissipated, no one would be able to see its charm. Therefore, even if Chu Xiu wanted to hand it over to them, he wouldn't be able to. Moreover, the two of them had actually entered Devil Sky territory, but they didn't see these things. Only Chu Xiu saw them, which proved that Chu Xiu was the one chosen by Dugu Weiwei. Some things didn't belong to them, but they forcibly seized them. The consequences might not be good. Chu Xiu smiled bitterly. I am too far away from Patriarch Dugu's realm. Even if I saw the images, I could only remember a few of them. I can't display them for the time being. Wei Shia waved his hand and said, even if the images are similar, it is enough. The martial arts passed down by Patriarch Dugu, even if only 10% of its power, is still amazing. Chu Xiu suddenly asked, by the way, Senior Wei, is there a portrait of Patriarch Dugu in devil lineage? Or do you know what Patriarch Dugu looks like? Chu Wuji said strangely, haven't you seen the images left behind by Patriarch Dugu? Don't you know what Patriarch Dugu looks like? Also, why are you asking this? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, in the images, Patriarch Dugu looks very blurry. I can't see his face at all. Now that I have inherited a part of Patriarch Dugu's martial arts, I am naturally curious about Patriarch Dugu. Wei Shia thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, although Hierarch Dugu used to be the demon lord who commanded the entire Devil Dao, he didn't like to portray himself as a god. Naturally, he wouldn't have left behind any portraits or anything like that. Even if he did, it would have been lost after 500 years. Moreover, 500 years is too long. People from the same era as Patriarch Dugu are almost all dead. At least, no one in Devil Dao lineage has seen Patriarch Dugu's appearance. Maybe there are some experts in Jianghu who used all kinds of strange methods to preserve their lifespan. However, there is no such person in Devil Dao lineage. Chu Xiu nodded, but he was still a little disappointed. Originally, he wanted to see if Dugu Weiwei looked like him. He wanted to see if the scene he saw before was a hallucination or an illusion. At this time, Chu Wuji said, by the way, didn't you ask Gongshu Yuan to help you refine the human puppet last time? It just so happened that he had finished refining it. He also asked Lu Jin to inform you. However, you were on a mission at that time, so I stopped the news. Now, you can come with me to see Gongshu Yu and ask him to help you complete the human puppet. Chu Xiu nodded. He didn't think that Gongshu Yuan's movements would be this fast. There was no need for Wei Shia, this senior, to do the rest. Chu Wuji brought Chu Xiu to Gongshu Yuan's residence. Gongshu Yuan didn't have a fixed residence. Usually, wherever good materials appeared, Gongshu Yuan would be there. Before, Gongshu Yuan had been wandering around West Chu. At this time, in order to wait for Chu Xiu, he was also staying in a secret area of West Chu's Devil Dao lineage. After walking for a few days with Chu Xiu, Chu Wuji and Chu Xiu arrived at a large residence in a small town. Gongshu Yuan was hiding underground in this residence. Entering the secret passage, the smell of blood assaulted their nostrils. Chu Wuji entered the underground secret area with a dark face. He saw that there were dim lights in the lobby and there were broken limbs everywhere, as well as some messy materials. It was like a scene of dismembered corpses. Seeing the originally neat lobby turned into this state by Gongshu Yuan, Chu Wuji couldn't help saying with a dark face, Gongshu Yuan. What did I say? If you want to do these things, find a secluded place and do whatever you want. This is a secret area that my Devil Dao lineage uses to gather in. If you make it look like a slaughterhouse, how will other people use it in the future? Gongshu Yuan disdainfully curled his lips and said, so fastidious. You fellows have killed quite a few people and now you're looking down on corpses? Relax, I'll clean it up for you when I leave. Saying that, Gongshu Yuan looked at Chu Xiu and complained, but I've been waiting for you for a long time. The human puppet is done. Come and take a look. Chu Xiu followed Gong Shu Yuan inside. Gong Shu Yuan waved his hand and a figure shrouded in a black robe walked over. The figure took off the black hat on his head and looked exactly like En Lionian. However, En Lionian was expressionless and had a dull expression. There was no vitality in his body. Gong Shu Yu said proudly, "I've refined more than one martial Dao Grandmaster level puppet. You can rest assured about the quality. Later, I'll tell you how to control the human puppet. The human puppet must be controlled with spiritual power, but it doesn't consume much energy. With your spiritual power, it shouldn't be a problem. If you have a deeper control over your spiritual power, you can make the human puppet make all kinds of subtle movements and expressions. It's enough to pass off as real. Now, just take out your hungry ghost Dao incarnation and fuse it into the human puppet. This will be the container. However, you have to be careful. The true spirit of your hungry ghost Dao incarnation is very fierce. Don't let it devour too much. Otherwise, if the human puppet breaks, your hungry ghost Dao incarnation won't devour you. However, it might escape and break free from your control." Chu Xiu nodded and released his hungry ghost Dao incarnation. In an instant, the evil hungry ghost Dao incarnation appeared in the Great Hall and emitted an extremely evil aura that could devour everything. Even Chu Wuji was amazed. This thing was the embodiment of an evil being that had condensed to the extreme. It couldn't even be called a demon. It was simply an evil being. Gong Shu Yuan nodded and immediately began to take out a large number of formations. He performed a lot of manipulations that Chu Xiu couldn't even understand. In a short time, he successfully sealed the hungry ghost Dao incarnation into the human puppet. Wiping the sweat off his head, Gong Shu Yuan nodded and said, "Done. Chu Xiu, boy, I'll tell you in advance that I don't provide after-sales service. If there's any problem, you'll have to pay me more." Chu Xiu didn't get angry. He just nodded and said, "No problem." With Gong Shu Yuan's style, it was actually pretty good to hand over the goods at the same time. Of course, with this kind of character, he was destined to be unable to get along in the Jianghu, even if it was the hidden devil lineage. Everyone liked to talk about favors and karma. Today, you help me, I help you in the future. Returning favors back and forth seemed convenient, but it was actually troublesome. In fact, it was better to be like Gong Shu Yuan, saying one thing as one and two things as two. After getting the human puppet, Chu Xiu parted ways with Chu Wuji and temporarily returned to the Guanzhong torture room. After all, he was a member of the Guanzhong torture room. Although it wasn't a problem to leave temporarily, he was afraid that Guan Xiyu would suddenly look for him. Of course, it didn't matter if he looked for her occasionally. There was still Mei Qinglian to help him in the Guanzhong torture room. Anyway, she was confident that she could deal with Guan Xiyu. After Chu Xiu returned to the Guanzhong torture room, he didn't immediately appear in front of everyone. Instead, he carefully checked his body, but he still didn't find anything. His strength had greatly improved, and his combat power had greatly increased. His condition couldn't be better. At this moment, even if he were to challenge Shang Qingjin, who hadn't stepped into the martial Dao Grand Master realm, Chu Xiu would dare to fight. However, what happened in the Devil Sky realm was like a dark cloud that shrouded Chu Xiu's heart, and it couldn't be dispersed. Especially when he had just stepped into the Devil Sky realm, a strange emotion eroded Chu Xiu's will. If it wasn't for the stone slab with "Invincible Destiny" written on it suddenly shattering and protecting Chu Xiu's will, who knew what might have happened next? However, the only thing he could be sure of was that this body of his was definitely connected to Duguwewa. As for exactly what sort of secret was hidden within this, Chu Xiu was unable to see it, nor was he able to touch it. However, the only thing he was certain of was that the connection between him and Duguwewa was definitely not as simple as being a mere inheritor. Rubbing his chin, Chu Xiu mumbled, "Perhaps I should look for a divination master to do a divination for me?" The path of divination had always been mysterious, and there were very few people who could cultivate this path to the extreme. For example, the Karma Meditation Hall's first seat of the Great Light Temple, and an expert from the Celestial Master's abode's Zhang family who was of the same generation as the old Celestial Master, were all proficient in this path. Of course, not to mention that existences of that level wouldn't help Chu Xiu. Even if they would, Chu Xiu wouldn't dare to. Who knew what secrets they would divine? However, he had heard that there was a divination master named Yuan Ji in the northern Yen. He seemed to be quite famous, but he didn't know why he had come to West Chu recently. Should he look for him to have his divination done? Chapter 620. Chu Xiu just thought about it casually. After being away for such a long time, it was time for Chu Xiu to take care of the Guanzhong torture room. After coming out, Chu Xiu asked someone to find the Ghost Hand King and asked him if anything else had happened in Guanxi during this period. In fact, some of Chu Xiu's trusted subordinates in Guanxi had already noticed Chu Xiu's frequent disappearances, especially people like the Ghost Hand King, who usually helped Chu Xiu take care of miscellaneous affairs. He vaguely guessed that Chu Xiu's identity should not be that simple and somewhat mysterious. However, although the Ghost Hand King had guessed something, he did not say a word. An experienced guy like the Ghost Hand King knew when to say something and when not to. At the moment, they were all relying on Chu Xiu. As long as Chu Xiu could maintain his current strength and status, they did not care what secrets Chu Xiu had. Why would they ask for trouble? At this time, facing Chu Xiu's question, the Ghost Hand King shook his head and said, "Guanxi is peaceful. With the strength of the Guanxi torture hall, it is not a problem to suppress the entire Guanxi Wulin. Oh, by the way, some time ago, a mysterious man came to Guanxi. I sent someone to pay attention to him, but he has been cultivating in seclusion all the time. He is very mysterious." The Ghost Hand King carefully looked at Chu Xiu and said, "That man seems to be an expert in the martial Dao realm." Chu Xiu knew who the Ghost Hand King was talking about. That person should be Lu Hongye. Master Lu could not go back at all. At this time, he had become Lu Hongye, a swordsman of the Yinma clan, which was actually the best ending for him. In the Battle of Red Maple Valley, Chu Xiu killed so many people. He was the main culprit, and Lu Hongye was the #1 accomplice. If the news spread and the people in Jianghu knew that Lu Hongye was still alive, not only would he go down in history, but he would also be in an extremely dangerous situation. Therefore, he could only seek protection from the Yinma clan. Lin Ye's identity was a good choice. Of course, it was not Chu Xiu's suggestion for Lu Hongye to come to the Guanzhong torture room. He could not tell Lu Hongye his identity. Chu Xiu only asked Lu Hongye to choose a place to cultivate and lay low. After all, it was not long ago, it was not suitable for Lu Hongye to show up. That was why Lu Hongye chose the Guanzhong Punishment Hall, a neutral place, and coincidentally chose Guanxi. It could only be said that he was indeed fated with Chu Xiu. He casually waved his hand and said, "I know, but you don't have to worry about this person. Withdraw all the people monitoring him. He is not an enemy." Judging from Chu Xiu's tone, the Ghost Hand King seemed to know this man. Although Chu Xiu often brought people back to Guanxi, such as Lu Fengxian, Feng Buping, and the others, they were either friends of Chu Xiu, or they were not that strong. Now, official Chu even knew a martial Dao master? The Ghost Hand King did not ask further. He continued, "There's no movement in Guanxi, but there's some movement in the torture chamber's headquarters." Chu Xiu raised his brows and said, "What movement?" The Ghost Hand King said, "I heard that the head of the punishment division is in seclusion for a long time. He might not come out for several years. Therefore, all the affairs of the punishment division will be handled by the second head, Fang Sha, and the third head, Si Ming. Moreover, the punishment division is planning to recruit a large number of people. Some of them are outsiders. Of course, priority will be given to the constables in the 4 branches of the Guanzhong torture room. There are also some constables in the Guanxi division who are tempted to join the punishment division. Sir, should we suppress them? There's no need for that. We don't have to stop them if they want to seek a future." Chu Xiu rubbed his chin. He seemed to know what was going on. Guan Xiu did not want others to know that En Liuyan was dead. In Xiaofan Heaven, nobody had seen En Liuyan being killed. Moreover, En Liuyan had always kept a low profile. Therefore, to a certain extent, although En Liuyan was a martial Dao master, as long as he did not take the initiative to reveal his identity, he was just a nobody in the pugilistic world. Therefore, after Xiafanshan, there was no news from the pugilistic world that En Liuyan, the head of the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall's punishment division, had been killed. Only then did Guan Xiu feel at ease. She released the news that Liuyan was in seclusion, creating the illusion that there were still 3 martial Dao masters in the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall. Of course, Chu Xiu wasn't going to expose this. After all, he was now a member of the Guanzhong torture room and had to rely on the Guanzhong torture room to hide his identity. Perhaps Chu Xiu would do things that harmed others to benefit himself, but Chu Xiu could not be bothered to do things that harmed others without benefiting himself. By the way, sir, there's news from the main hall. They're preparing to redistribute the punishment division and the powers of the 4 branches. They'll need you to make a trip to the main hall soon. I was the one who received the news, but you were still in seclusion at that time, so I did not disturb you. Chu Xiu nodded. This was within his expectations. And Liuyan's death might not necessarily be a bad thing for Guan Xiu. In the past, when Liuyan was still around, he controlled more than half of the punishment division's power. Even Guan Xiu could not interfere. However, now that he was dead, Fang Sha could not do anything alone. It was time for a change in the distribution of power in the Guanzhong torture room. After asking the ghostly Hand King for the time, Chu Xiu headed straight to the Guanzhong torture room headquarters. It had been a long time since Chu Xiu had visited the Guanzhong torture room headquarters. This time, all the martial artists who saw Chu Xiu, be they from the main hall, the branches, or the punishment division, were extremely respectful to Chu Xiu. The number 1 on the Longhou leaderboard was publicly acknowledged by the entire pugilistic world as an outstanding talent of the younger generation. In the past, this honor mostly belonged to the disciples of the major sects, especially the Taoist, demonic, and Buddhist lineages, as well as the 5 major sword sects. In the past few centuries, 80% of those who were qualified to be number 1 on the Longhou leaderboard were from these few sections. In this generation, it was finally their Guanzhong torture room's turn. This was an honor that the Guanzhong torture room had never achieved since its establishment. Therefore, it was very normal for Chu Xiu to be respected. The meeting would only begin the next day. As this matter was of great importance to the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu arrived at the torture division headquarters a day earlier. The other 3 torturers had also arrived earlier. Among them, the Guannan torturer, Chu Simo, was extremely polite to Chu Xiu. With Chu Xiu's current strength and status, he was indeed no longer in the same realm as them. Even the strongest among them, Shao Yi, was the same. He was very polite to Chu Xiu. As for Yin Badong, who had a grudge against Chu Xiu, he did not even dare to say a word of nonsense when he saw Chu Xiu. He could not wait to avoid him. Fortunately, with the protection of the Guanzhong torture room's laws, Chu Xiu could not kill his colleagues. Otherwise, Yin Badong could not guarantee that he would still be alive. When entering the headquarters, Chu Xiu happened to bump into Fang Sha. In fact, the grudge between Fang Sha and Chu Xiu was even greater. This was because Chu Xiu had snatched his opportunity to enter Xiafanshan. Others might be afraid of Chu Xiu, but Fang Sha was a martial Dao grandmaster. Even if he had no confidence in defeating Chu Xiu, he would not be afraid of Chu Xiu. However, Fang Sha's current behavior was a little strange. Facing Chu Xiu, Fang Sha's reaction should be anger. However, at this moment, Fang Sha gave Chu Xiu a fake smile and said, "Number 1 on the Longhou leaderboard, Chu Xiu. It's really worth it for you to enter Xiafanshan this time. I didn't expect the Guanzhong torture room to produce such an outstanding talent like you. This is really gratifying and worth celebrating." Chu Xiu frowned slightly. Fang Sha's sarcasm made him feel a little strange. Given Fang Sha's personality, Chu Xiu would not feel so awkward if they exchanged a few blows. Raising his eyebrows, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Why? Are you unconvinced, Leader Fang?" Fang Sha said indifferently, "I wouldn't dare to be unconvinced. After all, you Chu Xiu have a backer. However, you will soon find out that your backer is actually unreliable." With that, Fang Sha turned and left, leaving Chu Xiu puzzled. Who was Fang Sha talking about? His backer? Guan Xiu? Just as Chu Xiu was pondering, Mei Qinglian's voice came from behind Chu Xiu. "Since you've come to the torture room headquarters, Won't you come to my place for a chat? Chu Xiu turned around and said, Of course, this isn't the place to talk. Bringing Chu Xiu to her room, Mei Qinglian waved her hand to isolate the sound. Then, she sized up Chu Xiu with a slightly astonished gaze. I really didn't expect you to complete this matter so beautifully. It simply exceeded my expectations. Did old Senior Wei give you a reward? Opening the Devil Sky realm for 12 hours. How's that? Mei Qinglian was shocked. Devil Sky realm. It's actually 12 hours. TSK, Senior Wei really treats you well. That group of conservative old fellows actually agreed? Chu Xiu said indifferently, they didn't agree before. However, old Senior Wei threatened to take me to the moon-worshipping cult. They had no choice but to agree. Mei Qinglian revealed a smile and said, Old Ginger is spicier. Old Senior Wei's move is not bad. Looking at Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian raised her elegant brows and said, Since old Senior Wei gave you a reward, I won't mistreat you. You killed that fella in Liaoyan. You should know why Guanxiu asked you guys to come. Are you interested in the position of the head of the punishment division? Chu Xiu was puzzled. You want me to fight for the position of the head of the punishment division? What about the Guanxi region? Actually, the position of the head of the punishment division was no longer attractive to Chu Xiu. What he wanted was the entire Guanzhong torture room. Mei Qinglian said casually, Your subordinates are quite strong. Just leave it to them. Since we are going to take over the Guanzhong torture room, we have to obtain such an important place as the head of the punishment division. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and said, Since that's the case, we still have to obtain the most authority. If it's possible, I even want to get rid of Fang Sha. At this point, Chu Xiu had a feeling that something was wrong. He kept feeling that Fang Sha was a little strange. Because of the heaven's sun gazing at air spell, Chu Xiu was a little sensitive to certain things that concerned him. Now, he had an indescribable strange feeling. Chapter 621. Although the Guanzhong torture room did not have a long history, the distribution of authority had always been rather reasonable. The 4 branches were in charge of guarding the 4 regions of Guanzhong. The main branch was in charge of handling all sorts of intelligence from these 4 regions, analyzing them and providing support. As for the Criminal Investigation Bureau, they were the strongest combatants in the Guanzhong torture room. They were only in charge of simple and direct killings. It was precisely because of this tight system that the Guanzhong torture room was able to prosper and become stronger. The Guanzhong torture room was said to be in between the imperial court and the pugilistic world precisely because of this system. However, because of Liaoyan's death, Guanxiu wanted to reclaim his authority. Thus, there was quite a commotion in the Guanzhong torture room. Not only did Chu Xiu and the other torture officers and the head of the Criminal Investigation Bureau attend the meeting, but there were also some powerful patrol envoys under him, like the Ghostly Hand King and Tangya. There were also some powerful secret agents who belonged to the Criminal Investigation Bureau. In the end, the scale of the meeting was a little too large. There were close to 100 people participating. The meeting hall could not accommodate them all, so everyone could only move to the courtyard in the center of the main branch to carry out the meeting. Guanxiu sat on the chair in front of him, and Mei Qinglian sat by his side. She had the appearance of a wife following her husband's lead. Xiao Yi and the others were already used to Guanxiu bringing Mei Qinglian with him every time he held a meeting. However, some of the martialists who had not interacted with Guanxiu for the first time found it strange that old Master Guan had such a side to him. Of course, these thoughts only flashed through their minds. No one was foolish enough to step forward and say anything. Guanxiu looked around and said in a deep voice, I believe everyone already knows that the head of the Criminal Investigation Bureau, Liaoyan, is in seclusion. He might not come out for many years. Hence, we need to reorganize the Criminal Investigation Bureau. We need to get rid of some of the people who are doing nothing and promote some capable constables into the Criminal Investigation Bureau. After Guanxiu said that, he subconsciously glanced at Fang Sha, as Guanxiu's words had been directed at Fang Sha. If Liaoyan was dead, then so be it. If Guanxiu only wanted to divide the authority and Liaoyan left behind, it would be very easy. She just needed to change a few people. But now, Guan Xiu wanted to reorganize the entire Criminal Investigation Bureau. Who else was this targeting if not him? Hence, Guan Xiu thought that Fang Sha would definitely be prepared to refute or even fly into a rage. Who would have thought that Fang Sha would only show a cold smile and not say a word? Although Guan Xiu was a little puzzled as to why Fang Sha was so calm today, he did not ask. Instead, he continued to assign a few other tasks and said in a low voice, "All Guangzhou Disciplinary Hall martial practitioners who wish to join the Punishment Division can come to the Punishment Division to register. However, they must pass the Punishment Division's test before they can join. The various disciplinary officers are not allowed to stop them." Xiao Yi spread his hands indifferently. Actually, it was not just him. Even the petty Yin Badong did not plan on stopping him. In the underworld, killing one's parents, stealing one's wealth, and preventing one from improving were the biggest taboos. If their subordinates wanted to join the Criminal Investigation Bureau, they could let them do so. Those who did not have the willpower were not considered true confidants. Another reason was that if these people who joined the Criminal Investigation Bureau could make a name for themselves, they would naturally have to respect their superiors who had given them this opportunity. Hence, this was a good opportunity to expand their connections. Guan Xiu continued. The head of the Criminal Investigation Bureau is temporarily unable to manage it. Hence, second leader Fang Sha is naturally in charge. However, I intend to change the third leader of the Criminal Investigation Bureau to Chu Xiu. Si Ming will be the fourth leader. As soon as this was said, everyone present was in an uproar. No one had expected that Guan Xiu would actually give Chu Xiu such a high position. Following an Lionian seclusion, Chu Xiu received the best treatment in the Criminal Investigation Bureau, apart from second leader Fang Sha. He could practically get anything he wanted. This naturally attracted the dissatisfaction and jealousy of some martialists. Si Ming, who had been replaced, did not say anything. He was Guan Xiu's true confidant, so he did not care much about other things. Furthermore, Si Ming's authority had not changed. Without an Lionian, Chu Xiu was now the second leader, while Si Ming was still the third. Hence, in general, Si Ming did not suffer a loss. As soon as Guan Xiu finished speaking, Fang Sha immediately stood up and said coldly, "Hall Master, I advise you to think twice before making such an important decision. Since when has the Criminal Investigation Bureau allowed an outsider to wield such great power?" Guan Xiu frowned and said, "Chu Xiu is the disciplinary officer of the Guangzhou torture room. He is an elite of the Guangzhou torture room. When did he become an outsider?" Fang Sha sneered and said, "Hall Master, how long has it been since we joined the Guangzhou torture room? How long has it been since Chu Xiu joined the Guangzhou torture room? For so many years, we have worked our hearts out for the Guangzhou torture room. Who here is not more experienced than Chu Xiu? If he is not an outsider, then what is he? He is in charge of the Guanxi area alone, and he is also the leader of the Criminal Investigation Bureau. With such glory, Chu Xiu's position in the Guangzhou torture room is second only to you, Hall Master. What right does Chu Xiu have?" Fang Sha's words actually echoed the thoughts of many of the Guangzhou torture room's martialists. The younger generation of martialists looked at Chu Xiu with reverence and envy. They saw Chu Xiu as their idol. However, to the older generation of martialists, Chu Xiu, a junior, was able to sit in such a position. Wasn't the Hall Master too biased toward him? Mei Qinglian said calmly, "Leader Fang, the Master wants to reorganize the Guangzhou torture room's power division. It is actually to get rid of some people who don't do anything. If experience is useful, then what's the use of ability? Everyone in the pugilistic world has seen Chu Xiu's ability. He is number 1 on the Longhu leaderboard. This is an absolute glory. In other sects, Chu Xiu's position is second only to the sect master. Now that he is in the Guangzhou torture room, is it too much to give him an additional leader position? Leader Fang, don't disappoint us." Guan Xiu waved her hand and said, "Madam is right. All right, let's do this. Fang Sha, although you are now the second in command of the criminal division, and Lionian isn't here. You are carrying out the duties of the big leader. You don't have to feel wronged." Fang Sha stood up and said coldly, but I still refuse to accept this. Hall Master, you have changed. Ever since this demoness came to the Guanzhong torture room, you have changed. She bewitched you to protect Chu Xiu and promoted Chu Xiu, a junior who just joined the Guanzhong torture room, to such an honorable position. It won't be long before most of the power in the Guanzhong torture room will be nibbled away by them. When that time comes, will the Guanzhong torture room be Madame Mei's Guanzhong torture room, or will it be Master Guan's Guanzhong torture room? The moment Fang Sha said this, everyone present was stunned. Everyone stared at Fang Sha with their mouths agape. Was this guy crazy? Even in Liuyan wouldn't have dared to say such things in the past. Fang Sha was a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room, and he was a very slippery person. Previously, during the struggle between Liuyan and Guan Siyu, he hadn't stood on either Liuyan's or Guan Siyu's side. He had only guarded his portion of power. As long as he did his job well, then everything would be fine. He rarely spoke much. But now, his words were practically shedding all pretense of cordiality with Mei Qinglian and Guan Siyu. However, to be honest, what Fang Sha said actually made sense. They could also sense that Mei Qinglian's words seemed to carry more weight in the Guanzhong torture room. In the beginning, Mei Qinglian was only Madame Guan, and she didn't participate in the affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. But later, every time there was a meeting in the Guanzhong torture room or something important, Guan Siyu would bring Mei Qinglian along. It was even to the extent that Mei Qinglian could openly voice her suggestions on some major matters, and Guan Siyu still listened to her. This caused everyone to be unable to help but wonder who exactly the Guanzhong disciplinary hall belonged to. There was also Chu Xiu. When he had first joined the Guanzhong torture room, although Chu Xiu was also on the Longhu list, he didn't have such strength and fame. But at that time, Chu Xiu was already extremely daring. He even dared to publicly kill his own superior and go against the laws of the Guanzhong torture room. If Mei Qinglian hadn't spoken up to protect Chu Xiu, he would have been severely punished by the Guanzhong torture room. Instead of saying that Chu Xiu was Guan Siyu's man, it would be better to say that Chu Xiu was Mei Qinglian's man. Guan Siyu's expression was gloomy. He suddenly stood up and said coldly, "Fang Sha, are you crazy? You've been in the Guanzhong torture room for a long time. We even worked together in the past. I know you're feeling a little uncomfortable. Step down. I can pretend that nothing happened today." Mei Qinglian put on an aggrieved expression and said, "I just saw that Master was working too hard, so I wanted to do something for the Guanzhong torture room. I didn't expect that I would be misunderstood as wanting to interfere with the power of the Guanzhong torture room. Well then, I'll stay in my boudoir from now on, lest it affects Master's reputation." Fang Sha pointed at Mei Qinglian and said with a sneer, "You're still pretending here. When we first met you, we were all fooled by you. The dignified holy virgin of the Shadow Demon sect, who is also a famous figure in the Inma clan, is actually pretending to be a weak girl from a humble family. Amazing, amazing. Your acting skills are much better than your strength." Fang Sha turned his head to Chu Xiu and said with a sneer, "Chu Xiu, you didn't expect this, did you? The person you're relying on is actually a wicked demoness with evil intentions. I've said that your backer is unreliable." Everyone present looked at Fang Sha with their mouths agape. What did he say? Madame Mei was the holy virgin of the Shadow Demon sect? A demonic witch? Or a martial arts master? How was that possible? The Shadow Demon sect only existed in name and was not famous in the Jianghu. Therefore, some people present had not even heard of the Shadow Demon sect and thought that Fang Sha was talking nonsense out of anger. However, they did not realize that the pitiful expression on Mei Qinglian's face had become somewhat distorted in an instant. Chapter 622. Fang Sha's words caused everyone present to fall into absolute silence. Mei Qinglian had been in the Guanzhong torture room for many years. How did she suddenly become the holy maiden of the hidden devil faction? The Guanzhong torture room had survived in the cracks of the 3 countries. In fact, it wasn't a righteous path, nor was it a demonic path. However, they definitely wouldn't lean towards the demonic path. If Mei Qinglian was really the holy maiden of the demonic path, What was she planning after hiding in the Guanzhong torture room for so many years? Just thinking about it made people feel terrified. Mei Qinglian raised her head. She still had that pitiful look on her face. She said in a sorrowful voice, "Lord Feng, what are you saying? How did I become the holy maiden of the demonic path?" Feng Sha said coldly, "Demoness, you don't have to continue pretending. If I didn't have concrete evidence, would I say it in front of everyone?" Just as Feng Sha was about to say something, Guan Xiu suddenly raised her head and said expressionlessly, "Get out." Feng Sha was stunned for a moment, as if he hadn't reacted yet. He looked at Guan Xiu in shock and said, "Hall Master, I really have evidence to prove that this demoness is the holy maiden of the Yin demon faction. If I've wronged her, I'm willing to commit suicide on the spot." When everyone present saw Feng Sha say such words, they were almost certain that Feng Sha really had evidence. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said it so resolutely and gambled with his life. Guan Xiu wasn't a soft-hearted person. His actions today could be considered to have shed all pretense of cordiality with Guan Xiu. If he was lying, then there really wouldn't be a place for him in the Guanzhong torture room after this. However, Guan Xiu didn't give him a chance to speak. She only said coldly, "I told you to get out. Didn't you hear me? Since you don't want the position of the actual controller of the arrest division, then let someone else take it. The Guanzhong torture room may lack everything, but it doesn't lack people." Feng Sha still wanted to say something, but a loud laugh came from outside the main hall. "Chief Feng, you still don't understand. What did I tell you before? This hall master Guan of your Guanzhong torture room isn't an idiot. An idiot wouldn't be able to run the shaky Guanzhong torture room to this extent. Mei Qinglian's identity could be hidden from others, but after being together for so long, how could she hide it from Siyu? The Yin Demon Master's great enchantress art was indeed miraculous. Other mental secret arts affected the spirit, but the great enchantress art affected the heart. However, for those with a strong will, it was impossible to resolve. Master Guan is known as the Iron Judge. He seems to have a heart of stone, but in reality, his heart is very soft. Everyone present immediately looked back and saw a group of people walking in from outside the courtyard. The leader was a middle-aged man with a small mustache and dressed in a refined manner. He exuded a scholarly aura, but this person had the strength of a martial arts master. Beside him was an old eunuch with the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm. Chu Xiu also knew this old eunuch. It turned out that he was the personal eunuch of Eastern Qi's crown prince, Lu Longji, Eunuch Chen. He had dealt with Chu Xiu a few times, but he had always suffered at the hands of Chu Xiu. There was a group of experts behind the two of them, and the weakest was in the Three-Flower realm. This group of people were actually the elites of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army. Seeing Chu Xiu, Eunuch Chen even gave Chu Xiu a sinister smile. "Yang Gongdu, what do you want? Who gave you the guts to break into my Guanzhong torture room?" Guan Xiu looked at the middle-aged scholar coldly, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. When they heard Guan Xiu, everyone present here suddenly recalled exactly who this person was. He was the poison dragon warrior, Yang Gongdu, who ranked 45th on the list. Although this person was a martial arts master, he was ranked on the list not because of his martial arts, but because of the shocking things he had done. Yang Gongdu was a scholar who had studied since he was a child. He went from Western Chu to Northern Yen, and then to Eastern Qi. He took the exam in 3 countries consecutively for 20 years, but he failed all of them. He was even forced to rely on being a guest and a teacher to pass his days. If someone else had encountered such a blow, they would have probably given up a long time ago. However, extraordinary people naturally had extraordinary things. In Yang Gongdu's dictionary, the word "give up" did not exist. This person was extraordinarily stubborn about power. However, what Yang Gongdu learned and what the imperial examinations were testing were 2 different concepts. He was good at scheming, politics, and the art of being an emperor. No one would test such things in the imperial examinations. In addition, Yang Gongdu was extremely stubborn. He disdained learning the Confucian classics, benevolence, and morality that he looked down on. Therefore, he could only continue to fail. Later, when Yang Gongdu became a middle-aged man and became a teacher for a wealthy family, he felt that his physical strength had declined. Therefore, he learned some martial arts from the head guard of the wealthy family. Unexpectedly, his talent in the martial Dao was extremely astonishing. After practicing ordinary martial arts for a few months, he was stronger than the head guard who had been practicing for decades. By a freak combination of factors, Yang Gongdu began to cultivate the martial Dao. His journey was smooth, and he cultivated to the realm of a martial arts master. However, he himself hated using simple and violent means to solve problems. He had always thought of himself as a scholar. He was full of strategies and the art of being an emperor, and he was prepared to sell them to the royal families. In the beginning, Yang Gongdu relied on his own strength to become an official in the northern Yan. He was a general in the military. When the northern Yan Wulong Emperor joined forces with the northern Yan Jianghu to resist the eastern Qi, he put in a lot of effort. He cooperated with the large northern Yan sects to help. However, because he intervened in the fight for the throne, he made some mistakes and was pushed to the bottom by the Wulong Emperor. He was even hunted down by the northern Yan royal family. Later, Yang Gongdu moved to West Chu. He wanted to persuade the West Chu royal family to use the local martial arts forces to strengthen their influence. Under his secret plans, he did indeed cause a lot of trouble in West Chu. In the end, he offended the Celestial Master Mansion and the moon-worshipping cult at the same time. In the face of such powerful strength, even if he had a stomach full of schemes, it was useless. In the end, he could only be forced to leave West Chu. However, no matter what, Yang Gongdu's ability to cause trouble was recognized as strong. His schemes were strange and his methods were ruthless. He had the power of a dragon, but unfortunately, he was a poisonous dragon. If the Son of Heaven used him properly, he would be a great help. Otherwise, Yang Gongdu, this poisonous dragon, would turn against his master. When Yang Gongdu was forced to leave West Chu, there was no trace of him. Who knew that he would be with Gonggong Chen at this time? Obviously, he had already taken refuge with the Crown Prince, LV Longji. At the beginning, LV Longji wanted to subdue the rogue cultivator forces in the southwest and open up the West Chu trade route. This was in line with the intentions of the Eastern Qi Emperor. If it succeeded, the strength of LV Longguang's subordinates would increase greatly. At the beginning, Chu Xiu was still wondering who gave him this idea. LV Longguang's ability level was very mediocre. Now that things were clear, the person who gave LV Longguang the idea should be Yang Gongdu. Now that Yang Gongdu had appeared here, with this person's personality, it was likely that he had some scheme up his sleeves and was preparing to execute it. This person always caused chaos wherever he went. He was definitely a dangerous person. Yang Gongdu took out a folding fan and casually fanned himself. With a smile on his face, he said, "Hall Master Guan, please calm down. This time, I did not trespass into the Guanzhong torture room. It was leader Fang Sha who invited me here. Originally, I did not want to interfere with the internal affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. However, this matter concerns the Hidden Devil Faction's group of demonic cultivators. Since someone invited me, how could I refuse?" Guan Xiu looked at Fang Sha. There was a rare trace of killing intent in his eyes. When Fang Sha saw Guan Xiu's gaze, he immediately felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. He subconsciously took a step back. At this moment, Yang Gongdu took a step forward and cut off Guan Xiu's killing intent. He chuckled and said, "Hall Master Guan, don't be anxious. The good show has not begun yet. Are you already busy killing people to silence them? It's a bit early." As he spoke, Yang Gongdu casually cupped his hands towards Mei Qinglian and said, "Yin Demon Sect's holy maiden, I have long heard of your name. Back when the Yin Demon Sect was still around, you were very low-key. Many people have heard of your title, but they do not know what you look like. You don't even know your name. The Yin Demon Sect has been destroyed for so long. I reckon that even the enemies of the Yin Demon Sect in the past believe that you are already dead and that the Yin Demon Sect no longer exists. However, it is a pity that no one can truly be invisible under the sun. Your identity has long been known by others and has even been revealed. Furthermore, it is someone from your Hidden Devil faction. Of course, I will not reveal who this person is. Holy maiden, there is no need to be in a hurry to refute me. Words are no proof. Since I dared to come here, I definitely have evidence on me. The Een Demon Sect's enchanted maiden technique is very peculiar. It affects one's mind. It just so happens that I have a heart-testing stone produced in the Western region. It is very sensitive to techniques like the enchanted maiden technique. If Holy Maiden has the guts, then hold the heart-testing stone and see if there are any interesting changes within it. The pitiful expression on Mei Qinglian's face gradually disappeared. She had once again been deceived by someone. Moreover, it was her own people who had betrayed her. If she were to find this person, she would definitely dismember his body into 10,000 pieces. Fang Sha hurriedly said, Hall Master, I know that you have been bewitched by this demoness enchanted maiden technique. That is why you have always subconsciously stood on her side and been driven by her. Now that we have killed this demoness, my Guanzhong torture room will still be the Guanzhong torture room. Mei Qinglian also let out a long breath. Demonic qi surged around her, and a powerful aura bloomed. It was stronger than Yang Du's, stronger than Fang Sha's, and even weaker than Guan Xiyu's. This show couldn't go on any longer. The enchanted maiden technique could only subtly influence a person's mind. This kind of influence was like flowing water, silently moisturizing things. However, it could not really turn a person into a puppet. She had already been completely exposed. There was no need to continue acting. Just as Fang Sha was excitedly rubbing his palms and preparing to attack, Guan Xiu suddenly took a step forward. She formed a seal with her hands, moving mountains and filling seas. A seal turned into a boundless power that crushed towards Fang Sha. Fang Sha's face immediately revealed a stunned expression. Was the Hall Master completely controlled by the enchanted maiden technique? That Mei Qinglian had already admitted her identity. Why did she still attack him? Chapter 623. Guan Xiu's sudden attack stunned Fang Sha. He couldn't understand it. It was normal for Guan Xiu to attack him in order to protect his woman. The Iron Judge also had his own selfish motives. But now, they had already exposed that witch, Mei Qinglian's identity. She was hiding in the Guanzhong torture room and by Guan Xiu's side. She was clearly plotting something. In the end, Fang Sha didn't attack Mei Qinglian but attacked himself. What was the meaning of this? Fang Sha was stunned, but Yang Gongdu wasn't. Yang Gongdu waved the folding fan in his hand, and his stellar energy transformed into a sharp blade that swept over. Clanging sounds rang out as it blocked in front of Fang Sha. Although he managed to block Guan Xiu's attack, Yang Gongdu was forced back a few steps. Yang Gongdu rubbed his numb wrist and chuckled. The Divine Nine Transformations really lives up to its reputation. Fang Sha seemed to react at this moment. He looked at Guan Xiu in disbelief and said, Hall Master, why did you attack me? Could it be that you've really been completely controlled by that witch? Yang Gongdu sneered. Chief Fang, what did I say before? Don't you understand? Hall Master Guan wasn't bewitched by Mei Qinglian from the beginning. He knew of Mei Qinglian's identity even before we did. Mei Qinglian's eyes immediately widened. She suddenly raised her head to look at Guan Xiu and said in disbelief, You knew of my identity from the beginning? The witch art has never been effective? A bitter smile appeared on Guan Xiu's face. She nodded and said, From the first day you came to my side and tried to use the enchanted maiden technique to influence me, I noticed it. Lord Shu Kuanga once left behind many strange cultivation techniques. Among them was a cultivation technique used to restrain mental techniques and guard one's heart. Your witch art isn't effective against me. Mei Qinglian was silent for a while before she said, Then why didn't you expose me all these years? Why were you so submissive to me as if you'd fallen for my witch art? Guan Xiu sighed and said, In the beginning, I only suspected your identity, so I wanted to keep you by my side to see exactly what your goal was. I wanted to see which power had ill intentions towards my Guanzhong torture room. It was just the right time to draw the snake out of its hole and capture them all in one fell swoop. But in the end, can't you feel my feelings, madam? I've always loved you. A look of disbelief appeared on Mei Qinglian's face. She had always thought that Guan Xiu was obedient to him because the enchanted girl technique was effective. The enchanted girl technique was extremely sensitive to the manipulation of people's hearts. If Guan Xiu had evil intentions towards him, the enchanted girl technique would definitely detect it. Therefore, she dared to boast in front of Chu Xiu that she could deal with Guan Xiu. But who would have thought that it wasn't the great art of beauty that took effect, but Guan Xiu actually fell in love with her? Yang Gongdu shook his head and said, "To be honest, when I deduced this, I was also very surprised. With Hall Master Guan's status, what woman can't you get? This saintess is indeed extremely beautiful, but she's a rose with poisonous thorns. Ordinary people can't touch her. Hall Master Guan, do you know that you're playing with fire? Taking in a demonic path's saintess, can you face the ancestors of your Guanzhong torture room in Chujuxia?" Guan Xiu lowered her head slightly and said expressionlessly, "The tribulation of love is difficult. Who can explain the word, love, clearly? Everything I learned was taught in the Guanzhong torture room. My current status and power were bestowed to me by Lord Chu Kuanga. All these years, I've been conscientious and conscientious. I've never let down the Guanzhong torture room, nor have I let down Lord Chu Kuanga's trust. I, Guan Xiu, have a clear conscience. I've done everything that I can. If I can't even protect a woman I love, how can I, Guan Xiu, have the face to stand in the underworld? Yang Gongdu, I don't care what schemes you have today. In my Guanzhong torture room, all of this is a joke. Mei Qinglian is my wife, not some demonic path's saintess. No one will believe what you say, and no one dares to believe it." As she spoke, Guan Xiu looked around and said coldly, "Have any of you seen anyone from the demonic path in my Guanzhong torture room?" Xiao Yi and the others were shocked, and then they shook their heads. This matter had too much of an impact on them. There was too much information, and they were unable to digest it. But when they saw Guan Xiu's appearance, they immediately made the most suitable choice, and that was to stand on Guan Xiu's side. In the Guanzhong torture room, no one could shake Guan Xiu's status, power, or prestige. Even if he wanted to protect Mei Qinglian, no one in the Guanzhong torture room dared to stop him, and no one dared to say a word. As for how the people of the underworld would react if this matter spread to the entire underworld, that was not within their consideration for the time being. Yang Gongdu raised his eyebrows and said, "Hall Master Guan is indeed domineering. In terms of prestige, I'm afraid you're already close to Chu Juxia's status in the Guanzhong torture room. In the past generations of the Guanzhong torture room, I reckon that other than the founder of the Guanzhong torture room, only Chu Juxia and Hall Master Guan have the highest prestige. However, Hall Master Guan, you can protect Mei Qinglian, but can you also protect another big shot from the diabolism?" Yang Gongdu suddenly pointed at Chu Xiu with a sly smile and said, "Has anyone told you that Chu Xiu, the first on the Longhu leaderboard, is a hero of the Guanzhong torture room, an existence who brought glory to the Guanzhong torture room, is actually the ruthless rising star of the diabolism, Lin Yi, who just killed thousands of martial arts experts in Red Maple Valley." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone present was in an uproar. This matter was even more shocking to them than the fact that Mei Qinglian was the diabolism's holy maiden. The first and second on the Longhu leaderboard were actually the same person? Most importantly, Chu Xiu and Lin Yi had nothing to do with each other. How could they be the same person? Chu Xiu looked at Yang Gongdu expressionlessly. In fact, the moment Mei Qinglian's identity was exposed, Chu Xiu secretly cursed in his heart. He was afraid that he was also at risk of being exposed. Now, it seemed that it was indeed so. His identity had also been exposed. Could it be that it was also that traitor from the Yinma clan who leaked it? But who exactly was that traitor? Chu Xiu was not Mei Qinglian. He had always been in the diabolism, so it was inevitable that traces would be left behind. All along, Chu Xiu had been using two identities to do things. Therefore, the only people in the diabolism who knew of Chu Xiu's identity were Mr. Liu and Wei Shuya's people. Now that his identity had been exposed, Chu Xiu did not believe that it was Mr. Liu, Wei Shuya, or the others who had revealed it. If they had wanted to harm Chu Xiu, there would have been too many opportunities. The only explanation was that they had accidentally revealed it to one of their trusted aides, but that person had become a traitor. However, at this moment Yang Gongdu looked at Chu Xiu and smiled. Compared to Saintess Mei's identity, I am more curious about you. Chu Xiu, you have deceived the entire Jianghu. I reckon that no one would have thought that the first and second on the Longhu leaderboard were actually the same person. However, no matter how flawless your plan was, there would always be some traces left behind. In the past, when you were being chased by the Blue Dragon Society's former Heavenly Sin branch leader, Duan Tianlang, you pretended to be a member of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army. Only a few people knew about this, but no one cared about it. It was only when I helped His Highness the Crown Prince gain control of his portion of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army that I found out that you had pretended to be a member of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army and asked for help from the White Tiger Hall. At that time, the White Tiger Hall's hall leader was already dead, and the others were too weak. They were not responsible, nor were they in the mood to pursue this matter. However, I am a very curious person, so I specifically looked for the survivors of that White Tiger Hall's hall leader. In the end, I found out that when you pretended to be a member of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, you used the name Lin Yi. Chu Xiu said expressionlessly, "There are so many people with the same name in the Jianghu. Is it very strange that I randomly came up with a name?" Yang Gongdu shook his head. Of course it's not strange. If it was anyone else, even if they knew about this matter, they would definitely think that it was a coincidence. However, I am different. I am a very suspicious person, and also a very curious person. That is why I specifically went to investigate a lot of information about you. As I said before, under the sun, no one can truly become invisible. The degree of similarity between you and Lin Yi is too great. Some of your habits of speech, some of your actions, are extremely similar. As long as you appear, Lin Yi will not appear, and vice versa. Back in the minor mortal sky, I asked many cultivators, but you and Lin Yi have never appeared at the same time. Even when the Longhu list's outstanding talents fought Zhang Qingjin, Lin Ye's identity did not appear. Furthermore, every time Lin Yi was injured, you, Chu Xiu, would go into closed-door cultivation. I found out about your closed-door cultivation and rest schedule from some of the constables in the Guangxi region. You are shockingly similar to Lin Ye's. The first time might have been a coincidence, but with so many coincidences, is it also a coincidence? In terms of acting, Chu Xiu or Lin Yi, you are much better than that Saintess Mei. Chu Xiu heaved a sigh of relief. No one had betrayed him. In the end, he had been the one to give himself away. However, there was nothing he could do about this. Just as Yang Gongdu had said, no one could truly become invisible under the sun. No matter how careful Chu Xiu had been, it was inevitable that he would leave behind some clues. In particular, when he had chosen to use the alias Lin Yi, it had been a subconscious choice on Chu Xiu's part. After all, this was the name he had used for decades in his previous life. Furthermore, he had no control over the White Tiger Hall. When he had heard that the hall master of the White Tiger Hall had died, Chu Xiu had thought that this matter had been resolved. In reality, neither the White Tiger Hall nor the Dragon Riders Imperial Army had investigated this matter in detail. However, who would have thought that Yang Gongdu would not let go of this tiny clue and forcefully find out about Chu Xiu's identity? Yang Gongdu narrowed his eyes at Guan Xiu and said in a deep voice, "Hall Master Guan, you can protect Mei Qinglian, but can you protect Chu Xiu, who is also Lin Yi? One is the saintess of the Yin demon sect, and the other is a rising star of the hidden devil lineage. He has just become famous in the Jianghu with his ruthless methods. Your Guanzhong torture room will soon become a den of demons." Chapter 624. When Chu Xiu's identity was revealed, Guan Xiu was no less shocked than the others. This was because he really did not expect that Chu Xiu was also a member of the Devil Dao. He was actually Lin Yi. Guan Xiu was able to discover Mei Qinglian's identity because Mei Qinglian had taken the initiative to use the beauty technique on Guan Xiu. However, Chu Xiu did not reveal any flaws in front of Guan Xiu. Moreover, Chu Xiu had officially joined the Hidden Devil clan. To be precise, he had met Mr. Liu when he was investigating the Pegasus Ranch's Qiuzhenshan case. Therefore, in the beginning, Chu Xiu really had nothing to do with the Hidden Devil clan. Although Guan Xiu could also sense that Mei Qinglian was helping Chu Xiu, in his opinion, Mei Qinglian should have wanted to have more say in the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, she was prepared to support Chu Xiu, who did not have a complicated background and did not have much experience. Guan Xiu did not think that Chu Xiu was also a member of the Devil Dao. Fang Sha, who was at the side, had been in a daze since Guan Xiu had made his move. At this moment he seemed to have recovered. He glared at Yang Gongdu and said, "Why didn't you tell me that Chu Xiu was actually a member of the Devil Dao?" Yang Gongdu had even hidden this matter from him. Otherwise, Fang Sha would not have said those words to Chu Xiu at the beginning of the meeting. Yang Gongdu said lightly, "If I had told you everything, why would you have chosen to tell Guan Xiu everything in public? You would have probably told everything to Guan Xiu in secret, right? How could this matter have blown up?" Fang Sha's face revealed a trace of anger. He knew that he had been used by Yang Gongdu. In Fang Sha's opinion, exposing Mei Qinglian's identity was just like getting rid of a malignant tumor for the Guanzhong torture room. It wasn't a big deal, and the Guanzhong torture room could handle it internally. However, although Chu Xiu's strength was not at the Wu Dao Grandmaster level, he was more famous in the Jianghu, and things were more difficult to deal with. Fang Sha wasn't an idiot. He didn't really want to destroy the Guanzhong torture room, so if he found out about Chu Xiu's identity, he would definitely tell Guan Xiu in secret instead of saying it in front of everyone. From the very beginning, Yang Gongdu had wanted to make use of him to blow up the matter. Guan Xiu looked coldly at Yang Gongdu and said, "Speak, what exactly do you want?" Yang Gongdu was known as the Poison Dragon Warrior. His methods were ruthless and he would not do anything without benefits. Everything he did had a purpose. This time, he used Fang Sha to throw all the negative things about the Guanzhong torture room into the light. Guan Xiu couldn't think of anything else other than setting up the Guanzhong torture room and harming others without benefiting himself. Yang Gongdu narrowed his eyes and said, "Hall Leader Guan, this is not a small matter. The Guanzhong torture room has taken in Mei Qinglian, the Holy Virgin of the Darkness Demon faction, and Chu Xiu, a hidden rising star of the diabolism. This is a big deal in the Jianghu. Think about the karma of the Yinma bloodline and the people Chu Xiu has killed. Once his identity is exposed, trouble will come one after another. The Guanzhong torture room can't stop it. However, if you can stand on the Crown Prince's side and let the Guanzhong torture room merge with Eastern Qi and help the Crown Prince, Eastern Qi, will help you stop the messy things in the Jianghu. You, Guan Xiu, will still be the hall leader of the Guanzhong torture room. It won't be a problem even if you want to pass it on to your disciple or son." Hearing Yang Gongdu's words, everyone present understood Yang Gongdu's plan. He actually planned to seize the entire Guanzhong torture room. Originally, the Guanzhong torture room had nothing to do with him. Whether Guan Xiu was bewitched or deliberately took in the people of the diabolism, some things might be interesting, but it had nothing to do with Yang Gongdu. However, with Yang Gongdu's intervention, the meaning of all this changed. The Guanzhong torture room was located in the middle of the three countries. Since Guan Xiu became the hall leader of the torture chamber, she had always insisted on seeking a neutral position. However, at the same time, the geographical location of the Guanzhong torture room was also very important. If any country obtained the Guanzhong torture room, it would be equivalent to having an additional bridgehead to attack the other two countries. However, the Guanzhong torture room itself was not weak. Once someone forcibly attacked the Guanzhong torture room, not only would it attract strong resistance from the Guanzhong torture room, but it would also cause the other two countries to intervene. Therefore, under such circumstances, the three countries naturally formed a balance, and the Guanzhong torture room developed in this fragile balance. However, others could not attack the Guanzhong torture room. What if the Guanzhong torture room surrendered to another country? Yang Gongdu was the strategist of the Crown Prince, LV Longji. If he could help the Crown Prince seize the Guanzhong torture room, with this great contribution, no one in the whole of Eastern Qi would be able to shake LV Longji's position. Yang Gongdu would naturally have the merit to help the Crown Prince. After LV Longji ascended the throne, he could use his skills as an emperor to his heart's content and fulfill his ambitions. Guan Xiu squinted at Yang Gongdu and said coldly, "Surrender to LV Longji and Eastern Qi?" "Yang Gongdu, I'm afraid you've long set your sights on the Guanzhong torture room. Do you know how much I've sacrificed for the Guanzhong torture room today? Now you're telling me this and threatening me to join Eastern Qi. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Guan Xiu's aura was like a volcanic eruption. His aura soared into the sky and was extremely terrifying. There were strong and weak martial Dao masters. Xiao Liandong, the Yang family's patriarch, and Lu Hongye, who had died at the hands of Chu Xiu, were actually the weakest among the martial Dao masters. On the other hand, people like Zhen Yangzi and Su Xing were considered quite strong. Those who truly stood at the peak of this realm were people like Qinqing Di, Xian Longzi, and Chu Wuji. In the past, no one had thought that Guan Xiu could stand shoulder to shoulder with these people. Everyone thought that Guan Xiu was able to rank in the top 10 of the Wind Cloud list because of his status. In Xiaofan Heaven, Guan Xiu's attack had already shocked everyone. At this moment, Guan Xiu displayed his powerful aura without holding back. He could almost completely crush Fang Sha and Yang Gongdu. Even Mei Qinglian couldn't compare to him. Although Yang Gongdu was no match for Guan Xiu, who had displayed such a powerful aura, he still forced himself to walk out. He didn't even put up any resistance. Instead, he opened his arms and laughed. "Everyone in the world has underestimated you, Hall Master Guan, but I, Yang Gongdu, don't dare to underestimate you. I'm afraid I can't even withstand 3 of your Divine Power 9 transformations with my strength. However, I dared to come here today because I dare to bet my life with you, Hall Master Guan. I'll bet my life with the future of the Guanzhong torture room." Yang Gongdu's eyes flickered with madness as he said, "I know Mei Qinglian's identity and investigated Chu Xiu's secret. Do you really think that I didn't tell anyone? His Highness the Crown Prince already knows this news. If you kill me now, His Highness the Crown Prince will send this news to the Celestial Master Abode, the Great Light Temple, the Chunyang Dao sect, and all the other large sects in the pugilistic world. Furthermore, I've also added some harmless things to it. You should know what I'm best at. I can guarantee that after these large sects see these things, they'll definitely want to exterminate your Guanzhong torture hall immediately to eliminate the evil and defend the righteous. I'll use my life in exchange for the Guanzhong torture room that has been passed down for hundreds of years and is not inferior to the top large sects in the pugilistic world. It's worth it. Hall Master Guan, I dare to bet my life. I wonder if you dare to use the Guanzhong torture room that has been passed down for hundreds of years as a bet?" Eunuch Chen, who was standing behind Yang Gongdu, was crazily cursing Yang Gongdu in his heart. This lunatic. When he came, Yang Gongdu did not say that this matter would be so dangerous. He even used his life as a bet. He even looked so confident that Eunuch Chen thought that he was just here to show off and watch the show. He did not expect that as he watched, it would escalate to the level of gambling with his life. Yang Gongdu wanted to court death, but he did not. Everyone present looked at Yang Gongdu with a solemn gaze. Those who could be listed on the honor roll list were all existences that could stir up a storm in the pugilistic world. None of them were ordinary people. Wind Sweeping Tower would not allow a mediocre person to enter the honor roll list. That would be destroying their own reputation. Actually, Yang Gongdu's life was not considered a success. He had always been a failure. He had painstakingly helped the Northern Yen Alliance and gathered the strength of many pugilistic sects to defeat Eastern Qi. In the end, he lost everything because he participated in the battle for the throne. After that, he stirred up a storm in West Chu and almost succeeded. However, at the same time, he offended the 2 strongest forces in the world, the moon-worshipping sect and the celestial master manor. He was chased out of West Chu and did not dare to return. Yang Gongdu's life was full of defeats. Although he almost never won, he did not die under such an encounter and did not lose heart. He began to seek refuge with LV Longji and continued to stir up trouble in the pugilistic world. This person's tenacity and perseverance were rare in the world, and it was enough to prove his strength and ability. Today's scene was almost the same as Yang Gongdu had expected. Guan Xiu was not so easy to yield to, and what he lacked was strength. There were people in Eastern Qi who were stronger than Guan Xiu, but none of LV Longji's subordinates were. Therefore, even if Yang Gongdu invited the few martial Dao masters who were on LV Longji's side, he would not be able to defeat Guan Xiu. Instead of taking the initiative to court death, he would rather take a gamble with Guan Xiu. In Yang Gongdu's analysis of Guan Xiu's character, there were only two things that Guan Xiu valued the most in his life. One was Mei Qinglian, and the other was Guanzhong torture room. Although seeking refuge with Eastern Qi went against the direction of Guanzhong torture room's development, it could protect Guanzhong torture room. It could even temporarily make Guanzhong torture room stronger. Yang Gongdu believed that Guan Xiu could easily figure out what to choose. Yang Gongdu's actions were a little crazy, but when he gambled with others, he would usually only make a move when he had 50% confidence. As for the remaining 50%, it would depend on the will of the heavens. If the heavens wanted you to succeed, 50% was enough. If the heavens wanted you to die, even if there was only a 10% risk, you would still die. Chapter 625. Everyone turned to look at Guan Xiu. Guan Xiu's words could decide the future of the Guanzhong torture room. In fact, among everyone present, Xiao Yi and the other torture officers of the Guanzhong torture room were the unluckiest. They relied on the Guanzhong torture room to survive, and no one wanted anything to happen to the Guanzhong torture room. However, looking at the current situation, it was obvious that there would be no peace. Therefore, they all looked at Guan Xiu nervously, waiting to see what she would choose. Would she stick to her position as the head of the Guanzhong torture room, or would she agree to Yang Gongdu's request and join LV Longji's Eastern Qi? Guan Xiu looked at Yang Gongdu and said expressionlessly, "Yang Gongdu, I don't know if you still remember that we met once. Back then, you were a general staff of the Northern Yan Army and worked for the Northern Yan Army." Yang Gongdu nodded and said, "Of course I remember. At that time, I didn't have my current reputation, and Hall Master Guan had just taken over the Guanzhong torture room and was surrounded by enemies." Guan Xiu said in a deep voice, "Since you remember me, you should know my character. Even under those circumstances, I didn't compromise, let alone now. I, Guan, have never been threatened. Yang Gongdu, do you know what your biggest weakness is? It's not that there's a problem with your schemes, but that you're an extremely egoistic and self-opinionated person. You're talented and smart. At the age of 20, you're already full of schemes. You're familiar with the politics of the emperor. Those Confucian classics are no problem for you. Even if you pretend, you can pretend to be a Confucian master. However, you're too lazy to even look at them, causing your imperial examinations to fail for more than 20 years. Your martial arts talent is outstanding, and even though you started practicing martial arts in your middle age, you still managed to reach the realm of a martial arts grandmaster. However, you still look down on martial artists and think that politics and strategy are the most important. However, you were forced out of West Chu by the powerful martial arts of the moon-worshipping cult and the celestial master's mansion. Even now, you still haven't changed this habit of yours. You want to threaten me without absolute strength? You're still courting death. Crown Prince, if you want to reveal all of this, then go ahead. After killing you, I will give the righteous path a complete explanation." Yang Gongdu faintly felt that something was wrong. His expression changed slightly as he asked, "What explanation?" Guan Xiu narrowed her eyes and said, "An explanation for the internal strife in my Guanzhong torture room. Lin Yi, the villain of diabolism, pretended to be Chu Xiu and lurked in my Guanzhong torture room. He colluded with you, the trusted advisor of His Highness the Crown Prince, in an attempt to overthrow my Guanzhong torture room and split the Guanzhong torture room between Eastern Qi's Crown Prince and diabolism. I set things right and killed all of you. Isn't it easy to explain all this? It doesn't matter if others believe it or not. What the righteous sects want is results, an explanation. Once I kill you, I'll have an explanation." As soon as Guan Xiu's voice fell, Chu Xiu's figure moved, and he directly turned around to escape. After keeping a low profile for more than 10 years, even in the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Xiu the iron-faced judge, only gave people the impression that she was impartial. However, it had to be known that when Guan Xiyu took over the Guanzhong disciplinary hall in the past, there were both internal and external troubles. Guan Xiyu's ability to use a few years to swiftly stabilize the situation during such a precarious time was absolutely not just because she was impartial. The current situation was a mess, but Guan Xiyu's method of resolving it was undoubtedly the simplest and most labor-saving. She killed everyone, and then Guan Xiyu could explain herself. The other righteous Dao sects could give whatever reason they wanted. Looking at Chu Xiu's figure, Guan Xiyu's eyes revealed a hint of coldness. She made a seal with her hand, and the majestic genuine qi seemed to turn into a boundless sea wave, condensing into a sea eye that kept spinning. An extremely strong suction swallowed everything, and it actually pulled Chu Xiu's figure backward. Magical 9 transformations, sea stirring. Chu Xiu, you disappoint me. If you weren't a member of the Yinma clan, I would really be prepared to nurture you as the next successor of the Guanzhong torture room. Guan Xiyu's eyes revealed a deep sense of disappointment. This was not hypocritical hindsight, but the truth. Previously, Guan Xiyu had not thought that Chu Xiu was a member of the Yinma clan. Therefore, after Chu Xiu stepped into the Longhu list, Guan Xiyu was really prepared to let Chu Xiu take over the Guanzhong torture room. Although Chu Xiu had displayed many shortcomings, such as being too selfish and scheming, and his ruthless methods to the point of being extremely bold, these were not considered problems in Guan Xiyu's eyes. The Guanzhong torture room's position was sensitive. If it was really handed over to a mediocre person with a hesitant and indecisive character, the Guanzhong torture room would be completely finished. Chu Xiu had both strength and ability. He was just right to take over this position. However, who knew that Chu Xiu was also a member of the Yinma clan? What he wanted was not to be the successor of the Guanzhong torture room, but to plot to annex the Guanzhong torture room. This was absolutely intolerable to Guan Xiyu. With a gentle push of his palm, the vortex of Gang Qi spun rapidly and finally exploded with a loud bang. The extreme pulling force came with a loud bang, as if it wanted to completely tear Chu Xiu, who was in it, into pieces. With a Buddhist seal in his hand, the Buddhist light around Chu Xiu suddenly erupted. However, the deep Buddhist light was filled with a frightening demonic aura. The power of Buddha and demonic suppressed him at the same time, forcibly resisting the pulling force of the churning sea. This barely allowed Chu Xiu's figure to remain intact in the explosion of the Gangqi vortex. However, this also consumed an extremely shocking amount of energy for Chu Xiu. Guan Xiyu's churning sea was definitely a killer move for warriors with weaker physical bodies. If Chu Xiu had not cultivated the 9 heavens demonic golden body and the great Vajra divine strength, which were both strong body-refining techniques, he would have been torn to pieces by this move. Just as Guan Xiyu was about to make another move, Mei Qinglian blocked in front of Guan Xiyu and frowned. "You can't kill Chu Xiu." Guan Xiyu's eyes softened a little as he said softly, "Madam, get out of the way. Don't worry, things haven't reached the point of no return. Chu Xiu killed countless people as a demonic cultivator. Now that his identity has been exposed and he has fooled countless people, the righteous sects will definitely not let it go. Therefore he must die. Only with his death can I give the people of Jianghu an explanation. However, you are different. The Yin demon sect has long been destroyed, especially you. You don't have much karma. After I kill Chu Xiu and kill Yang Gongdu and the others, I am confident that I can protect you and completely separate you from the Yinma clan. With me here, no one can touch you." Mei Qinglian shouted in a low voice, "You are crazy. You only think of the righteous sects, but do you know Chu Xiu's position in the Yinma clan? If you kill him, how will you give the Yinma clan an explanation?" Guan Xiyu said lightly, "I don't need to give the Yinma clan an explanation. In this situation, I must stand on the side of the righteous and demonic. At present, the righteous and demonic sects are opposing each other. The Yinma clan and the bright demon sect together are not as good as the righteous martial arts world, let alone the Yinma clan alone. It is clear who is strong and who is weak. I can't stand on the side of the weak, so I can only give the strong an explanation. I have no choice. "Madam, you don't need to say any more. I said that I will protect you. Stand to the side." Mei Qinglian did not retreat. Instead, the demonic aura around her body lingered, as if there was a goddess dancing. It did not seem like an evil demonic path, but there was another kind of magical feeling. Guan Xiu fell in love with her, but in fact, Mei Qinglian did not fall in love with Guan Xiu. She only had a complicated feeling about Guan Xiu. Was it guilt, was it moved, or was it something else? Mei Qinglian herself wasn't sure. However, Mei Qinglian could see her position very clearly. She was a member of the Yinma clan and had a close relationship with Wei Shuya. She could also be considered as a member of Wei Shuya's faction. Chu Xiu was a person that Wei Shuya valued. He was the heir of the Yinma clan. Although many people in the Yinma clan might not think so, after the last meeting, Chu Xiu entered the Devil Sky realm. At least in name, Chu Xiu was the heir of the Yinma clan. Therefore, no matter what, Mei Qinglian would only stand on Chu Xiu's side. Guan Xiu shook her head and said, "Madam, you are too naive. I said that the enchanted girl technique has no effect on me. Master Chu Kuanga left behind many techniques, which I have integrated into the Divine Nine transformations. Mental techniques are useless against me." As soon as she finished speaking, Guan Xiu formed a seal with her hand and lightly spat out 2 words, "Exorcism." A thin and small divine shadow condensed. It had 3 faces and 6 arms. It looked weak, but wherever it passed, the demonic aura around Mei Qinglian dissipated. She could feel that her mental strength was being suppressed. On the other side, Chu Xiu's body was circulating the demonic rotation great technique in a frenzy. An invisible longbow condensed in his hand, and the god-vanquishing arrow was unleashed. A powerful mental strength burst forth, but it was caught by the 6 arms of the divine figure and was forcibly broken. In the past, when Xiahou Zhen came to fight, Guan Xiu used this exorcism to forcibly break the Xiahou clan's imperial spirit technique. Those who had not fought with Guan Xiu would not understand how terrifying he was. In fact, Guan Xiu's martial Dao was very similar to that of Chu Xiu. He was good in all aspects and had no obvious shortcomings. The Divine Nine transformations was a masterpiece that condensed dozens or even hundreds of martial arts. When stacked together, its power was infinite. Guan Xiu threw out a strange array disc in his hand. At the same time, his body erupted with stellar energy. He did not have a saber in his hand, but countless stellar wind saber chi burst out and enveloped Mei Qinglian. Guan Xiu used the Divine Nine transformations Call Wind, but he did not really kill Mei Qinglian. Call Wind only forced Mei Qinglian into the range of the array disc. When the array disc landed on the ground, a mechanical sound was heard. A blue halo appeared and constantly weakened Mei Qinglian's mental strength and stellar energy. She wanted to break the blue halo, but the power on it suddenly solidified, making it impossible for Mei Qinglian to destroy it. She could only be imprisoned within it. Guan Xiu said faintly, "Madam, don't waste your energy. That is the black martial sex god imprisoning prison. It is specially used to temporarily imprison some grandmaster-level experts. When I kill them all, I will let you out." Chapter 626. Guan Xiu's strength was beyond the imagination of Chu Xiu and Mei Qinglian. Mei Qinglian didn't expect that Guan Xiu, who had always been obedient to her, would be so powerful. Even if Chu Wuji came, he wouldn't have much of a chance of winning. Chu Xiu also had a gloomy look. He had underestimated Guan Xiu. It should be said that Guan Xiu had been hiding his strength all along. In fact, Chu Xiu had seen Guan Xiu fight many times. Previously, he saw Guan Xiu fight against Xiahou Zhen. He won easily, but he clearly didn't use his full strength. It was easy, but it wasn't a crushing defeat. In the Xiaofan heaven, Guan Xiu's opponents weren't too strong. Guan Xiu's cultivation was only slightly stronger than theirs, so he defeated them easily. However, no matter how strong the opponent was, Guan Xiu's strength was always slightly stronger than his opponent. He defeated them easily. This was very terrifying because no one could figure out what Guan Xiu's trump card was. Now, Guan Xiu was almost using his full strength. Even a casual move made Chu Xiu and Mei Qinglian feel very helpless. At this time, Yang Gongdu had already taken advantage of Guan Xiu's attack on Chu Xiu and was preparing to retreat with his people. Speaking of which, Yang Gongdu's ability wasn't weak. However, as long as it was a trap that he set up, it seemed that he had never succeeded. It was as if he was born with bad luck. This time, Yang Gongdu's plan didn't go wrong. He investigated the identities of Mei Qinglian and Chu Xiu and made use of Fang Sha to completely blow things up. He forced the Guanzhong torture room into a desperate situation. If Guan Xiu's strength was a little weaker and his character was a little softer, then Guan Xiu would definitely agree to his request. Unfortunately, Guan Xiu was tougher than he imagined. Her strength was far beyond his imagination. She used her strength to break through. As long as she killed all of them, everything else would be easy to explain. At this time, seeing Yang Gongdu escape, Guan Xiu's eyes immediately revealed a cold look. Compared to Chu Xiu, Guan Xiu actually hated Yang Gongdu more. It was this person who instigated trouble, which led to today's events. How could he let Yang Gongdu leave so easily? Moreover, although Yang Gongdu kept fighting despite repeated failures, his overall plan had never succeeded. However, he was good at sophistry and was quick-witted. If he was allowed to return alive, he would be long-winded in the righteous Dao sects. Who knew he might cause trouble? It would be the easiest to kill him as well. Guan Xiu took a step forward and formed a seal with his hand. Xiu immediately, an array halo rose from the courtyard and blocked Yang Du and the others. Guan Xiu said coldly, "This is my Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall's inner hall courtyard. Do you think that there isn't an array formation protecting it?" Our Guanzhong Discipline Hall's history is a bit short, and our foundation is slightly lacking, but we can still use the sect protecting formation. Guan Xiu turned to Xiao Yi and the others and shouted, "Everyone attack! Kill Yang Gongdu and his subordinates. Don't leave a single one alive." Xiao Yi and the others looked at each other and did not say anything. They immediately attacked Yang Gongdu and the others with the warriors of the Guanzhong torture room. This was the power that came with prestige. No matter what happened to the Guanzhong torture room in the future, or what storm would arise from today's events, as long as Guan Xiu was not dead, he would be the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room. They would also habitually listen to Guan Xiu's orders. In the end, Guan Xiu glanced at Fang Sha and said in a deep voice, "Fang Sha, you were also used by others. On account of the fact that you have no ill intentions towards the Guanzhong torture room, I will give you a way out. Kill Yang Gongdu, and you will still be the second in command of the punishment division. Your power will not change. I will pretend that today's events never happened." Fang Sha gritted his teeth. The murderous aura around him surged as he attacked Yang Gongdu. He had no other choice but to listen to Guan Xiu. Moreover, he really hated Yang Gongdu. He hated him for using him and causing such a mess. Yang Gongdu also held the folding fan in his hand and fought with Fang Sha. However, after more than a dozen moves, he was at a slight disadvantage. In fact, Yang Gongdu's talent and comprehension were very strong. Otherwise, he would not have cultivated in his middle age and missed several optimal cultivation periods. Even so, he could still cultivate to the Grandmaster realm. However, it was a pity that he did not focus all his energy on the martial path. As a result, although his cultivation level was not weak, his actual combat ability was not very strong. At the very least, he could not compare to Fang Sha. He did not rely on his strength to be ranked on the honor list. Chu Xiu cursed inwardly when he saw the array rising outside. Guan Xiu was really determined to catch them all in one fell swoop. Chu Xiu looked at Guan Xiu and said in a low voice, "Hall Master Guan, you don't have to be so ruthless. The righteous path's sects are not united. Although you can give them an explanation by killing me, you can forget about obtaining any benefits or protection. On the other hand, you can let us go today and only kill Yang Gongdu and the others. When the time comes, you can push all the blame onto the demonic path. Isn't that good?" Guan Xiu held the mountain-moving seal in her hand. It was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. The surrounding essence chi of heaven and earth emitted explosive sounds from being compressed. Of course not. Chu Xiu, no matter what you say today, it's useless. Since you plan to plot against my Guanzhong torture room, then today, you will stay in the Guanzhong torture room forever. People of Guan Xiyu's level and status could be described as stubborn or decisive. In any case, as long as Guan Xiyu had decided on something, it would not be easy to change her mind, let alone in this situation. Chu Xiu was cursing Yang Gongdu in his heart. This fellow was simply a god of plague. If he couldn't accomplish anything, he would also implicate others. Chu Xiu formed the fast and slow 9 words formula. The 9 seals merged into one, and the 9 Buddhist seals rotated rapidly like a wheel. Chu Xiu's body was in the middle of the wheel. As his hand's seals fell, the 9 Buddhist seals merged into one and blasted out. The power was earth-shattering, and Guan Xiyu's mountain-moving seal was shattered. Call the wind. These 2 words were uttered lightly. In an instant, endless astral energy gathered into a storm of blades. It swept out for thousands of feet and crushed towards Chu Xiu. The same move had only forced Mei Qinglian back temporarily. However, when it came to Chu Xiu, it seemed as if it wanted to hack him into 1,000 pieces. This difference in treatment was a little too great. Amidst the boundless blades, boundless blood qi erupted from the sky demon dance in Chu Xiu's hands. Chu Xiu used the blood transformation divine saber and activated the power of blood qi in his body, attaching it to the sky demon dance. As the saber slashed down, a fierce and sharp force rippled out. It tore apart the endless blade wind and headed straight for Guan Xiyu. In fact, Chu Xiu had not used his full strength all this time. Among the 2 identities, the identity of Chu Xiu had mastered more powerful martial arts techniques, while the identity of Lin Yi had mastered more evil martial arts like the mental demon rotation technique and powerful trump cards like the 7 demon saber and the hungry ghost Dao incarnation. If they were used separately, Chu Xiu could only use 70% of his strength at most. However, this time, when facing Guan Xiyu, Chu Xiu used his full strength. Guan Xiyu's expression did not change at all when she slashed apart the wind blade. She slammed her palm down, and a giant astral energy hand that was 1,000 feet long condensed in midair and grabbed at Chu Xiu. Divine 9 transformations, heaven overturning. This palm was not a simple slap, but a grab. Everywhere it passed, the heaven-earth essence qi was imprisoned. As for Chu Xiu, he was like Monkey Sun who had fallen into the Buddha's palm. The saber was very close, but it seemed as if it would never reach Guan Xiyu. The palm clenched as if it was crushing a fly. It wanted to crush Chu Xiu, who was within it. The moment the giant hand clenched, Chu Xiu, who was within it, formed a Buddhist seal. A Vairocana Dharma form bloomed behind him. It was as hot as fire, and Buddhist light illuminated the surroundings. Sun overturning technique. Endless golden Buddhist light bloomed from the giant hand. It broke through the obstruction and shattered the giant hand. Chu Xiu's figure was like a bolt of lightning as he charged at Guan Xiyu. At some point, the 7 demon saber had been placed on Chu Xiu's back. His hand was already holding one of the sabers. The saber's name was love. Greed, anger, obsession, hate, love, evil, and desire. Love was not a negative emotion. However, love could make people crazy, stubborn, and lose their hearts. When the love saber slashed out, there was no monstrous demon qi, nor was there any strange phenomenon. It was just a simple saber strike that didn't even contain a bit of earth energy. However, this saber strike triggered all sorts of emotions in Guan Xiyu's heart. Even if his 9 transformations divine power could resist the essence soul mystic technique, it was useless. This saber strike was aimed at Guan Xiyu's heart. The youth had joined the Guanzhong torture hall. Guan Xiyu had dedicated his life to the Guanzhong torture hall. For the sake of being impartial, who knew how much Guan Xiyu had paid? From his youth to his middle age, Guan Xiyu had always carried more responsibilities than anything else. Chu Kuanga's high regard for him and the expectations of the Guanzhong torture room's disciples had all been shouldered by him. It wasn't until Mei Qinglian came to his side that Guan Xiyu felt that his world seemed to have a different color. He knew that Mei Qinglian had evil intentions, and he also knew that her kindness to him was all an act. However, he didn't know when it started, but Guan Xiyu had slowly turned from accompanying her to entering the play himself. Life was like a play, and Guan Xiyu had already taken this play seriously. As the love saber slashed down, Guan Xiyu's figure seemed to freeze on the spot and didn't move at all. However, when the saber was about to reach him, Guan Xiyu suddenly reached out and grabbed the saber in his hand. He said in a hoarse voice, "This is the 7-demon saber that you used to severely injure Su Xing and kill Jianghu? It's very evil, but it's not strong enough." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu suddenly felt a huge force attack him. A powerful earth energy directly surged into the love saber. Chu Xiu's figure retreated a few steps, but the saber was forcibly broken by that powerful force. Guan Xiyu had love in his heart, but he used his strong willpower to suppress this love. For all these years he had always known about Mei Qinglian's identity and knew that Mei Qinglian was plotting against him in the Guanzhong torture room. However, Guan Xiyu still accompanied her in putting on an act and watched everything with a clear mind. Chapter 627. After obtaining the 7 demon blades, this was the first time that Chu Xiu had failed to use them. Of course, this was within Chu Xiu's expectations. The 7 emotions and 6 sensory pleasures were the power of a person's emotions. However, as long as they were emotions, there was a possibility that they could be suppressed. Just like Guan Xiyu, his emotions were extremely hot, but he could use his willpower to forcefully suppress these emotions. It was extremely terrifying. In other words, Guan Xiyu's self-control was much stronger than that of monks and Taoists like Su Xing and Jianghu. However, it was a pity that one of Chu Xiu's 7 demon blades had been destroyed. The 7 demon blades could not be considered a divine weapon. In terms of toughness, they were not even comparable to Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance. The 7 demon blades' true use lay in the evil power of the 7 emotions and 6 sensory pleasures. Once this lost its effect, the 7 demon blades would not even be comparable to an ordinary precious weapon. However, although one of Chu Xiu's 7 demon blades had been destroyed, his expression did not change at all. He still took the initiative to attack Guan Xiyu. Guan Xiyu snorted coldly. Just as he was about to continue attacking, he suddenly turned around. He formed a moving mountain seal and blasted it behind him. Unknowingly, a black-robed man was already standing behind him. Under the moving mountain seal, a strong gale blew up the black-robed man's mask, immediately revealing En Liuyan's pale and lifeless face. "You killed En Liuyan as well." A cold glint flashed in Guan Xiyu's eyes. He should have known that Chu Xiu, who was on his side, had a better reason to kill En Liuyan than any outsider. However, although Guan Xiyu could not see through the puppet's background, he could sense that En Liuyan's corpse was not only emitting an aura of death, but also an extremely evil aura. Therefore, his moving mountain seal did not stop at all. Instead, it blasted straight at En Liuyan. However, at this moment, En Liuyan's mouth opened wider and wider. In the end, his mouth was so wide that it did not seem human. Endless astral energy was being devoured by his huge mouth. An evil, hungry ghost with 2 horns crawled out of En Liuyan's mouth. It opened its mouth wide and wanted to swallow Guan Xiyu. This was the first time Chu Xiu had used the Hungry Ghost Realm clone with a human puppet. However, even Chu Xiu could not help but ridicule Gongshu Yuan when he saw the puppet attack. What the hell was he doing? The Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation only had a spirit, so he used a puppet as a vessel, allowing the Hungry Ghost Dao to condense an incorporeal body and then devour the real body. It was similar to when Chu Xiu used the Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation in the past. In the end, Gongshu Yuan set up a formation in the human puppet, forcing the Hungry Ghost Dao incarnation to crawl out of the human puppet's mouth. This was simply an aesthetic deformity, okay? Gongshu Yuan had been that, and he had set up a formation within the puppet. He demon and he had, Xiu Yuan had the ghost realm, so he had been Xiu. Vanquish evil. The 9 divine transformations contained countless cultivation techniques. Guan Xiyu's vanquish evil technique was easy to see traces of a Taoist demon-subduing cultivation technique. The instant Guan Xiu attacked, Chu Xiu also attacked with his finger. Endless death and destruction fused into it. A black power pierced through the void, as though it had split open a deathly silent land. Divine Vanquish Immortal Slaying Finger. At that moment, Guan Xiu did not even turn her head. Similarly, she lightly tapped with her finger, and a tiny sword chi flashed out. It looked inconspicuous, but even a physical invulnerability realm martial artist's sword would be more imposing than this tiny sword chi. However, this light sword chi tore apart the energy of heaven and earth. As it danced, it contained an extreme sharpness of swordsmanship. Any power was torn apart by the sword chi. Even the immortal slaying finger, which represented death and destruction, was no exception. The evil vanquish sword chi that filled the skies suppressed the ghost realm clone and forced the human puppet to retreat. The sword intent contained in the small sword chi was probably stronger than that of the Sword King City's 4 major sword hall heads. As it danced, it completely destroyed Chu Xiu's immortal slaying finger. Chu Xiu and Guan Xiu exchanged blows. Although it seemed like they were evenly matched, Chu Xiu's face had already turned pale. Regardless of whether he used the 7 demon blades or combined the 9 seals, only this kind of trump card could block Guan Xiu's move. Even if he used the human puppet, it wouldn't cause Chu Xiu to suffer the backlash of the Ghost Realm clone. However, the mental strength consumed by using the human puppet still belonged to Chu Xiu. After this series of exchanges, Chu Xiu's power was on the verge of drying up. Of course, it wasn't like Chu Xiu didn't have any room to fight. For example, the 7 ultimate moves he obtained from the Black Demon Tower made Chu Xiu vomit blood at a glance. There was also the Red Dust Slash and Triple City Annihilation Arrow, which he still didn't know if he could successfully use. However, these martial skills that even Chu Xiu wasn't sure if he could use were really unreliable. Once he used them, he would really be in a desperate situation. Of course, Chu Xiu's side was in danger, but some people were in even more danger, such as Yang Gongdu's side. Yang Gongdu's own strength wasn't very strong. Although the people he brought were from the Dragon Rider Imperial Army, they were only a few squads of the Dragon Rider Imperial Army. His opponents were the elites of the entire Guanzhong torture room. Regardless of whether it was Shao Yi, the torture officers, or the other warriors of the Guanzhong torture room, those who were qualified to come here to discuss matters were not ordinary people. Once they started fighting, the difference in strength was obvious. In particular, Fang Sha's attacks were almost crazy. He couldn't wait to tear Yang Gongdu's body into 1,000 pieces. This time, he had been used by Yang Gongdu and had almost been consigned to eternal damnation in the Guanzhong torture room. It was true that he had selfish motives and was dissatisfied with Guan Xiu protecting Mei Qinglian. However, he didn't want the Guanzhong torture room to be destroyed. The more they fought, the more dangerous the situation became. Even if Yang Gongdu used all his trump cards, it was still useless. Looking at Guan Xiu, Yang Gongdu shouted, "Guan Xiu, let me go. I have a big secret to tell you." Guan Xiu, who was preparing to completely take down Chu Xiu, was unmoved. Everyone in the Jianghu knew that Yang Gongdu's eloquence was much stronger than his martial arts. He was best at bewitching people, so Yang Gongdu couldn't be bothered to listen to his nonsense. Seeing that Guan Xiu wasn't listening to him at all, Yang Gongdu shouted, "Guan Xiu, don't you want to know how Chu Kuanga died back then? Chu Kuanga treated you like a disciple in the past, but he didn't tell you who seriously injured him until he died. Moreover, Chu Kuanga's death is related to the future of the Guanzhong torture room. If this problem isn't solved, I'm afraid that you, Guan Xiu, will not be far from death as Chu Kuanga's successor." Hearing Yang Gongdu's words, Guan Xiu suddenly turned around and said coldly, "What did you say? Do you know who tried to kill Master Chu Kuanga?" In the past, Chu Kuanga had just been in charge of the Guanzhong torture room for more than 20 years. He died in an accident in the prime of his life. This was a pity for the Guanzhong torture room and a mystery. As Chu Kuanga's successor, Guan Xiu knew how strong Chu Kuanga was in the past. He was even much stronger than he was now. He had already taken half a step into the true fire spirit refining realm. However, one day, Chu Kuanga was on the verge of death when he returned to the Guanzhong torture room. He used his prestige to hand the Guanzhong torture room over to Guanxiu and then died. No one knew who killed Chu Kuanga. At that time, although Chu Kuanga had many enemies, there were not many people in the Jianghu who could really kill him. It was not because of his strength, but because of his reputation. The reputation of the great hero Chu Kuanga was too great. He was not from the righteous path, but his chivalrous spirit was even greater than that of the righteous path sects like the Great Light Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect. Therefore, no matter how many people Chu Kuanga had offended, whoever killed him would definitely be reviled by many people in the Jianghu. Their reputation would be ruined and they would go down in history. At that time, there were no signs of the revival of the demonic path. Even the moon-worshipping sect leader Yi Shaonan was still in seclusion to comprehend the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra. He had no interaction with Chu Kuanga at all. Moreover, to put it bluntly, Chu Kuanga had offended more people from the righteous path than the demonic path. Therefore, it was unlikely that he was killed by someone from the demonic path. Including the examination of his injuries, no one could see who killed Chu Kuanga. However, at that time, the Guanzhong torture room unanimously believed that Chu Kuanga's actions must have angered some big shots in the Jianghu, causing one or even several forces to join forces to get rid of Chu Kuanga. Since the murderer could not be found, the matter could only be dropped. Now, according to Yang Gongdu, he knew the truth of that year. Fang Sha, stop. Guanxiu stopped Fang Sha, who was about to continue attacking. He had just turned his gaze to Yang Gongdu. Yang Gongdu did not dare to talk nonsense, nor did he habitually keep people in suspense. Instead, he told them everything in an extremely simple manner. In the past, Chu Wuxia died at the hands of Divine Lord Luo, one of the 9 divine generals of the Elysium. As soon as this was said, everyone present was stunned for a moment. They did not seem to be able to react. Then, Guanxiu shouted, "Impossible!" It was no wonder that everyone present had such a reaction. The Elysium was very close to the Jianghu, but it was also very far away. It was so far away that many people had heard of the Elysium, but they could only hear about it as a legend. They had never even seen it before. The wind-sweeping towers Jianghu song had spread throughout the entire Jianghu. From that day onwards, the forces in it had been constantly changing. Even the 3 major Dao sects were different from the 3 major Dao sects in the beginning of the Jianghu song. Apart from the North and South Buddhist sects, the only forces in the Jianghu song that had not changed were the 2 forces in the beginning, the East and the West. The East referred to the East Sea Freedom Heaven. It was a force that had been passed down for countless years. It only had one person, but it was comparable to the top sects in the Jianghu. The West referred to the West Kunlun Heavenly Sect. Even when the Kunlun Devil cult was at its peak, it had not been able to completely occupy the West Kunlun mountain range. It could only allow the West Kunlun Devil cult to look at it from across the mountain range. Chapter 628. The West Kunlun Heavenly Gate had existed in Jianghu for countless years. Since the great calamity of ancient times, the Heavenly Gate had always existed, but it was very mysterious, extremely powerful and mysterious. When everyone heard the songs of Jianghu, they would hear the names of the East and West heavens, but in reality, only a handful of people had seen them. Their strength still existed in legends. In the Wind-Sweeping Towers Dragon and Tiger Storm Supreme List, some of the rankings on the Supreme List had not changed for hundreds of years. For example, the first and second positions were reserved for Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. Before the corpses of these 2 people were found, even after 1,000 years, these 2 positions would not change. And now, the person ranked 3rd on the Supreme List was the East Sea Lord of the Unrestrained Sky, Zhong Shenxiu. He alone supported the top power in Jianghu. There were only a handful of people in Jianghu who had come into contact with Zhong Shenxiu. Even the wind-sweeping tower did not know what Zhong Shenxiu looked like or how strong he was. Everything about Zhong Shenxiu only existed in legends. It was said that Zhong Shenxiu had once played chess with the previous abbot of Sabodhi Monastery, the divine monk Abhikala, under the Bodhi tree. He won 100 years of Abikala's life, causing Abikala to give up the position of abbot the next day and pass away on the third day. It was said that Zhong Shenxiu had come to Hidden Sword Villa to borrow swords to play with, causing several divine weapons to recognize him as their master, but they were all abandoned by Zhong Shenxiu. It was said that Zhong Shenxiu had crossed paths with the moon-worshipping sect leader, Yi Xiaonan. They did not even exchange a single move before Yi Xiaonan took the initiative to admit defeat. He went into seclusion for decades to comprehend the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra. He vowed not to come out until he had mastered it. The most recent news about Zhong Shenxiu was from decades ago. The other protagonist was the sect leader of Heaven Gate, Jun Wuxian, who was ranked 4th on the Supreme List. The two of them had a great battle on the East Sea. It was said that the sky fell and the earth cracked. The result was that Jun Wuxian was seriously injured and did not take a step out of Heaven Gate for decades. These two were now legendary figures in Jianghu. Although Zhong Shenxiu was ranked 3rd on the Supreme List, he was actually the 1st in the world. And Jun Wuxian, who was still in seclusion in West Kunlun, was the 2nd in the world. Guan Xiu never expected that Chu Kuanga's death back then would be related to the Heavenly Gates. However, in reality, Chu Kuanga shouldn't have any interactions with the Heavenly Gates. Heaven Gate was an extremely mysterious sect. No one knew its origins. It was as if it was the Sweeping Sky sect, but because of it. Wind Sweeping Tower did not dare to include its details. Moreover, there were very few people in the Sky Gates. Apart from the Sky Gates sect leader, there were also 9 divine generals. It was said that although the 9 divine generals rarely took action, each of them had the ability to be ranked in the top 20 on the Wind Cloud list. However, due to special reasons, Wind Sweeping Tower did not dare to include their backgrounds in the Wind Cloud list. Other than these 9 godly generals, there were less than 100 people in the entire Heaven Gates. However, their disciples were all extremely talented, and only 1 in 10,000 had the qualifications to be accepted as a disciple by the Heaven Gates. Over the years, Heaven Gate spent 99% of its time in the West Kunlun mountain range. They rarely stepped out of Jianghu. Even if they did, they were alone or with a few people. There was almost no time when all of them went out. No one knew what Heaven Gate's purpose was, and no one knew what Heaven Gate wanted. Anyway, Heaven Gate had been strong for so many years and had never declined. Even when Kunlun Devil Cult was at its strongest, they could not completely drive Heaven Gate out of West Kunlun and dominate the Kunlun mountain range. Although the West Kunlun mountain range was very big and could accommodate dozens of other forces, let alone the Kunlun Demon Cult and the Heavenly Gate at the same time, how could they allow others to sleep beside their beds? With the power and influence of the Kunlun Demon Cult back then, they were unable to monopolize the Kunlun mountain range and still had to face the Heavenly Gate across the mountains. From this point, one could see the strength of the Heavenly Gate. If Divine Lord Luo, one of the 9 heavenly generals of Heaven Gate, took action, he indeed had the strength to kill Chu Kuanga. He also had the qualifications to not be afraid of trouble. Moreover, they could not see through the martial arts techniques of Heaven Gate. However, Guan Xiu could not understand why the people of Heaven Gate wanted to kill Chu Kuanga. Guan Xiu looked at Yang Gongdu and said coldly, Heaven Gate obviously has no relationship with Lord Chu Kuanga. Why do they want to kill Lord Chu Kuanga? Yang Gongdu, you are anxious to get away. There is a limit to the nonsense you can fabricate. Chu Xiu secretly recovered his vital energy and quietly moved backward. He was also very curious about this matter. At such a critical moment of life and death, Yang Gongdu would not dare to lie to deceive Guan Xiu. However, things had already reached this point. Whether it was true or not was no longer important. The most important thing was to find a way to get away. Yang Gongdu quickly said, Why would I make up such a bizarre thing to deceive you at such a time? Back then, the battle happened in Eastern Qi. Although there were very few witnesses, others did not know. Such a big thing happened in Eastern Qi. How could Eastern Qi not know? However, because one of them was a divine general of Heaven Gate and the other was Chu Kuanga, this matter was not publicized. Instead, it was recorded in a secret book of Eastern Qi and was accidentally discovered by me. Divine Lord Luo of Heaven Gate seemed to want something. He even did not hesitate to kill a force, but was stopped by Chu Kuanga. In the end, the two sides fought fiercely. Divine Lord Luo should not have obtained that thing. Moreover, Divine Lord Luo was also seriously injured. It seemed that due to the rules of Heaven Gate, he had to return to Heaven Gate on time, so he could only let Chu Kuanga leave on the verge of death. Furthermore, I've also analyzed the pattern of when the Divine Generals of the Elysium leave the Elysium. If I'm not wrong, Divine Lord Luo from the Elysium will leave the Kunlun Mountain soon. He will definitely go to the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall to ask for that item again. Hall Leader Guan, let me go this time. I am willing to mediate between you and Heaven Gate and end this matter once and for all. Although Heaven Gate is powerful, behind me stands the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Heaven Gate will give me face. In fact, Yang Gongdu already knew about this matter. He was also curious about the thing that Chu Kuanga had snatched from Divine Lord Luo of Heaven Gate. However, even an idiot could guess that the thing that could make the 9 great divine generals of Heaven Gate fight for it must not be an ordinary thing. Guan Xiu frowned. Too many things had happened today, some of which were beyond her expectations. She did not expect that in the end, the legendary Heaven Gate would appear. At this moment, a low and hoarse voice suddenly came from outside. Give face to Eastern Qi? Our Heaven Gate does not need to give face to anyone. Even if the old Emperor of Eastern Qi comes, it will be the same. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a strangely dressed guy standing outside. He was dressed in black and had a black armor carved with dragon patterns on his upper body. He was neither handsome nor ugly. He looked like an ordinary middle-aged man. However, the right side of his face was carved with a strange dragon pattern, which was exactly the same as the dragon pattern on his black armor. It made him look a little strange. Everyone present had been fighting for a long time, but even Guan Xiu did not notice when this person had arrived. Divine Lord Luo. Yang Gongdu's eyes widened as he uttered the name. Even Yang Gongdu himself did not expect that Divine Lord Luo would actually come. Wasn't his mouth a little too clever? Looking at the formation rising outside the courtyard, Divine Lord Luo grinned. It was a disdainful smile. He stretched out his finger and gently tapped the formation. A strange halo rippled out. He tapped it again, and the halo rippled faster and more intensely. Finally, with a loud bang, the protective formation of the Guanzhong torture room was instantly shattered. True Fire's spiritual cultivation realm. Divine Lord Luo from the Sky Gates was actually an expert in the True Fire's spiritual cultivation realm. Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He quickly gathered his strength and moved backward silently. He gave Mei Qinglian, who was trapped in the formation plate, a look. It was only then that Chu Xiu suddenly understood the reason for the drastic change in the Guanzhong torture room in the original plot. Previously, Chu Xiu had always thought that the huge change in the Guanzhong torture room in the original plot was caused by Mei Qinglian's plot to seize the Guanzhong torture room. However, it seemed that the saint was a little too naive. She thought that she was fooling others, but she did not expect that Guan Xiu had seen everything. Now that there was Chu Xiu, Guan Xiu could rely on her own strength to completely stabilize the situation. If there was no Chu Xiu, Yang Gongdu would have faced Guan Xiu head-on. Yang Gongdu reckoned that he would have died 8 times over. The one who caused the huge change in the Guanzhong torture room should be Divine Lord Luo from the Sky Gates. Even if Chu Xiu's appearance created a butterfly effect, it obviously could not affect a force of the level of the Sky Gates. Divine Lord Luo walked over, and the entire place suddenly fell into silence. When he walked up to Yang Gongdu, Divine Lord Luo suddenly said, "You are very annoying. I hate people like you who obviously have no strength but still jump up and down. I heard that you were chased out of West Chu because you offended the Celestial Master Mansion and the moon-worshipping cult at the same time. What the hell are Zhang Daoling and Dong Huangtai doing? They actually allowed a person like you to leave West Chu alive. And what I hate the most is that you actually dared to secretly investigate the Sky Gates. You don't know what you're doing." As soon as Divine Lord Luo's voice fell, Yang Gongdu instantly felt that something was wrong. He was good at observing people's hearts. At that moment, the extreme fear in his heart seemed to have overflowed, and Yang Gongdu subconsciously wanted to escape. However, before he could move, Divine Lord Luo had already slapped him. Yang Gongdu looked horrified as he shouted, "I am Eastern Qi." However, before he could finish his sentence, his body exploded into a cloud of blood mist with a loud bang. No one understood how Divine Lord Luo had attacked. It was just a simple slap across the air, and Yang Gongdu instantly disappeared without a trace. Chapter 629. No one had expected Sir God Luo to strike so decisively and kill Yang Gongdu with a single slap. Moreover, the reason was simply because he did not like Yang Gongdu. Just like what Divine Lord Luo had said, even if the Emperor of Eastern Qi came, the Elysium Gate would not give him face, let alone Yang Gongdu. For so many years, the Elysium Gate seemed to be isolated from the world. Most of the time, they stayed on West Kunlun Mountain. They did not invade other people's territory. They only guarded their own territory, so they were naturally not afraid of anyone. The court and Jianghu were always in opposition, but they also cooperated with each other. In Eastern Qi, even the Chunyang Dao sect and the real martial arts cult had to give the Eastern Qi imperial court some face, but the Elysium Gate did not need to. If you have the ability, you can send troops to bypass West Chu and enter the wasteland of the far west. Then you can go up to Kunlun Mountain to attack the Elysium Gate. Even when the Kunlun Devil cult was at its peak, they could not chase the Elysium Gate down from Kunlun Mountain, let alone the Eastern Qi imperial court. But Yang Gongdu's death was very ironic. He had been scheming and scheming all his life. Although most of them ended in failure, at least the momentum was not weak. Moreover, he had turned danger into safety many times. He had been courting death for so long, but nothing had really happened. So, Yang Gongdu felt that he was just unlucky, and it was not his problem. Until he died, Yang Gongdu finally understood that without strength, no matter how strong the scheme was, it would be useless. People like Sir God Luo wouldn't even give him a chance to speak. Unfortunately, when Yang Gongdu really understood this, it was already too late. Divine Lord Luo, who had killed Yang Gongdu like a fly, turned to look at Guan Xiu. He said calmly, "You are the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room?" Although that guy just now was very annoying, he was able to reconstruct what had happened back then. He was right. I'm here to take something back, something that belongs to me in the first place. You don't have to worry that I will take my anger out on you because of what happened to Chu Kuanga in the past. Although Chu Kuanga is a little stubborn, his strength is really not weak. He dared to fight me head-on before he reached the true fire spirit refinement realm. He actually fought to the point where both of us were injured, forcing me to return to the heavenly gates to recuperate for several years before I recovered. Of course, that fellow is also a little foolish. Is it worth it to throw away his life for a small clan that doesn't know what's good for them? Hearing this, everyone present was shocked. Previously, they thought that when Chu Kuanga fought with Divine Lord Luo had not yet reached the true fire spiritual refinement realm. It turned out that he had become an expert of the true fire spiritual refinement realm in just a few decades. Chu Kuanga was actually able to skip levels and fight with him, and both of them were injured. His strength was beyond their imagination. Guan Xiu's expression did not change. He only said in a deep voice, "I wonder what exactly the Heavenly Gate wants?" Before Chu Kuanga died, he did not leave anything behind. Although Guan Xiu was Chu Kuanga's heir, he was not Chu Kuanga. In the past, Chu Kuanga had fought with Sir God Luo just because Sir God Luo wanted to kill him and steal his treasure. In the eyes of many people, it was not worth it. However, in Chu Kuanga's eyes, human life was more important than heaven. It was worth it to exchange his life for the lives of dozens of people. However, to Guan Xiu, it was obviously not worth it. The power that Divine Lord Luo had displayed was almost overwhelming. Although Divine Lord Luo had said that he would not vent his anger on the Guanzhong torture room, judging from the way he had killed Yang Gongdu with one slap, it was obvious that Divine Lord Luo was a domineering person who believed that those who obeyed him would prosper and those who opposed him would perish. If he didn't hand over the item, It was hard to say what Sir God Luo would do. However, Guan Xiu really did not know what Divine Lord Luo wanted. What could he give? Before Chu Kuanga died, he was not the only one at the scene. There were so many people watching. Chu Kuanga really did not leave anything for them. Unexpectedly, when Divine Lord Luo heard what Guan Xiu said, he did not get angry. He only nodded thoughtfully and said, "That's right. Even Chu Kuanga himself should not know what that item is used for. He is really a fool. He snatched something from me, but he did not know what he snatched. Did he really do it for the lives of those trash idiots?" After mumbling, Divine Lord Luo waved his hand and said, "It's okay if you don't know. I will look for it myself. Where is Chu Kuanga's body buried? Take out his funerary items and the space secret box and see if they are there." Upon hearing that, the expressions of all the warriors who belonged to the Guanzhong torture room changed. There were even some old people from the Guanzhong torture room who wanted to rush forward and scold Divine Lord Luo without any regard for their lives. Divine Lord Luo actually wanted to dig up Chu Kuanga's mausoleum. This was simply a humiliation to the Guanzhong torture room. It was something that they absolutely could not tolerate. If one was not an old person from the Guanzhong torture room, one would not understand the prestige and status of Chu Kuanga in the Guanzhong torture room in the past. He was definitely an existence that was like a religion. If Guan Xiu relied on the law to maintain the Guanzhong torture room, then Chu Kuanga relied on his personal charm. In the eyes of the warriors from the Guanzhong torture room during that period, Chu Kuanga was absolutely a godlike existence that could not be insulted or blasphemed by anyone. Hence, before Chu Kuanga died, he abruptly chose to let Guan Xiu take over the position of Hall Master. Although there were many people who were dissatisfied and did not understand, they still chose to listen to Chu Kuanga and approve of Guan Xiu taking over the position of Hall Master. Otherwise, Guan Xiu's position as Hall Master would not be stable. At that moment, Divine Lord Luo actually said that he wanted to dig up Chu Kuanga's mausoleum. To most of the warriors from the Guanzhong torture room, this was simply intolerable. Guan Xiu's expression also changed. He said in a deep voice, "Lord Chu Kuanga has already been laid to rest. No one can disturb him, not even the Elysium. The Guanzhong torture room has no intention of becoming enemies with the Elysium. If the Elysium wants something, I can try my best to help you find it. However, insulting Lord Chu Kuanga is equivalent to insulting the Guanzhong torture room. The Guanzhong torture room absolutely cannot tolerate this." To Guan Xiu, there were two most important people and one most important thing in his life. The most important thing was to develop the Guanzhong torture room. At least when he stepped down as Hall Master, he could confidently say that he did not let down the Guanzhong torture room's nurturing. As for the two people, one of them was naturally Mei Qinglian, and the other was Chu Kuanga. Guan Xiu had joined the Guanzhong torture room when he was young. From then on, he had regarded Chu Kuanga as his idol and his guide. Although he was not Chu Kuanga's disciple, when he was in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Kuanga had taught him a lot of things without hiding anything. It could be said that Chu Kuanga was also a teacher and a father to him. All these years, he had worked conscientiously and painstakingly to develop the Guanzhong torture room to such an extent. A large part of the reason was that he did not want to let down Chu Kuanga's expectations in the past. Since Chu Kuanga had handed the position to him before he died, if he could not do it, how could he face Lord Chu Kuanga in the underworld? And now, there were people who wanted to touch Lord Chu Kuanga's mausoleum. This was something that Guan Xiu could not accept. After taking a deep look at Guan Xiu, Divine Lord Luo looked at the other old people in the Guanzhong torture room who were furious and even dared to glare at him, a true fire refinement realm expert. He could not help but shake his head and said, "Strange, this is really strange. You all know my abilities, so why are you still resisting? Aren't you afraid of death? Or do you really think that I am easy to talk to? You are just a dead person. His body has died and his Tao has disappeared. Other than his bones, everything else is gone. Why are you so stubborn? Do you know that you will die if you do this?" The last word, die, seemed to be said casually, but everyone present could not help but feel a chill from the bottom of their hearts. It was not a murderous intent, but a kind of contempt. In Divine Lord Luo's eyes, the people present were like ants that he could casually trample to death. It was just that he was finally able to leave the heavenly gates again, so he was in a good mood. He said a few more words to these ants. As long as they knew what was good for them, he could let them live. But why couldn't these ants see it clearly? Why did they use their lives to resist for something that was not important to him? Divine Lord Luo did not understand, just like how he did not understand why Chu Kuanga would fight him to the death for the lives of a bunch of ants. So now, Divine Lord Luo was a little angry. Guan Xiu let out a long breath and said in a low voice, "Because there are some things that must be protected, even if it means death." Lord Chu Kuanga represents the last dignity of the Guanzhong torture room. No one can blaspheme it, not even the heavenly gates. Divine Lord Luo shook his head and said, "Stubborn and troublesome. Why can't you let me save some energy?" As soon as he finished speaking, Guan Xiu suddenly felt an extremely dangerous aura. He formed a seal with his hand and the surrounding qi of heaven and earth began to spin wildly like the eye of the sea, gathering into a huge vortex of gang qi. He used stirring the sea, but he did not attack Divine Lord Luo. Instead, he used it to block in front of him. The next moment, an invisible force had already struck him. It was as if an invisible hand had clenched tightly in front of him. In an instant, the qi vortex suddenly collapsed. Guan Xiu's famous magical power, 9 transformations, was inexplicably broken in an instant. Divine Lord Luo's face revealed a look of disappointment. He said, "Weak, very weak. You are much weaker than Chu Kuanga. Chu Kuanga stopped me because he has the strength. You are so weak, why do you want to stop me?" As soon as he finished speaking, Divine Lord Luo used his palm as a knife and slashed in the air. However, the next moment, the endless qi of gang qi in the void condensed and transformed into an invisible blade that fell. Guan Xiu could not see anything, but in his perception, the world seemed to have turned into a hell of blades. Sharp murderous intent was everywhere. Chapter 630. Chu Xiu had seen a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse fight before. On floating Jade Mountain, several true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouses from the righteous and demonic sects fought. The fight was earth-shattering, and the entire floating Jade Mountain was almost shattered. However, Chu Xiu had never seen a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse like Divine Lord Luo. Even Guan Xiu had never seen one before. His attacks were invisible, but they were real. It was mysterious and strange, and it was impossible to figure out. However, Chu Xiu had a certain degree of confidence. After his strength rose to a certain realm, he could use heaven's sun gazing at air to see through this wonderful change. Of course, Chu Xiu had to wait until he reached a certain realm, at least a martial Dao Grandmaster. In the boundless blade hell, Guan Xiu's majestic gang qi suddenly erupted. A divine shadow shrouded her body and kept growing, resisting the invisible blades. This was the strongest move of Guan Xiu's divine 9 transformations, God's descent. However, this God was an illusory existence. It was not passed down in any legend, but forever existed in Guan Xiu's heart. Ah! Divine Lord Luo chuckled. He took a step forward and punched. A thunderous sonic boom suddenly rang out in the air. The divine figure that was constantly expanding started to crumble in an incomparably fragile manner. The divine light faded, and Guan Xiu's figure retreated step by step. Blood flowed uncontrollably from her mouth. On the ground where Guan Xiu was standing, there was a huge fist mark. It was several feet deep into the ground, and it was extremely terrifying. Divine Lord Luo shook his head and said, "You're a little stronger than I thought, but only a little. You can't compare to Chu Kuanga at all. You've seen my strength. It's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. I don't have much time, so don't waste my time here. Open Chu Kuanga's mausoleum. If you don't die, I'll save energy." Guan Xiu looked deeply at Mei Qinglian, and there was a complicated look in her eyes. She was the only woman he had ever loved in his life. He had never thought that this time, because of this unforeseen event, it would become an eternal farewell. Even without Fang Sha and Yang Gongdu, he would not have been able to avoid this calamity. Immortal Lord Luo was destined to come. This was the karma left behind by Chu Kuanga, so he naturally had to bear it. Guan Xiu was not someone who craved life and feared death, but he was truly reluctant at this moment. However, some things were even more important than one's life. If he wasn't the hall master of the punishment hall and was only the punishment master or the head of the punishment hall, then Guan Xiu could very well hide at the side and not voice any opinion. If Immortal Lord Luo were to start a massacre, he would resist with all his might. If not, he would not make a sound. But now, he was the leader of the Guanzhong torture room. Some karma and responsibility had to be shouldered. Others could retreat, but he couldn't. Guan Xiu took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Although I know that these words are very vulgar, I still have to say them. If you want to touch Chu Kuanga's mausoleum, then you'll have to do it over my dead body." "You're so stubborn." Immortal Lord Luo shook his head. He formed a seal with both his hands and pinched an extremely strange seal. He crossed his arms. In an instant, with Guan Xiu as the center, everything within a radius of 1,000 feet was completely separated and enveloped. It was as though Guan Xiu was in a different world from the people present. As Immortal Lord Luo clenched his arms, the space began to shrink in an instant. Guan Xiu, who was in the middle of it, roared furiously and performed the 9 changes continuously. All kinds of powerful moves were thrown out one after another. The power was extremely shocking, but it was as though they were confined to that side of the world and could not be broken at all. Chu Xiu could see that although Immortal Lord Luo's move did not leave any traces, he was probably using something similar to a realm that completely separated Guan Xiu from the outside world. Most of the people in the Elysium only existed in the legends of the underworld. Even the wind-sweeping tower did not dare to release the information of the people in the Elysium due to certain reasons. However, in Chu Xiu's opinion, the warriors in the Elysium, or rather, Sir God Luo, always felt like he was looking at ants when he looked at these ordinary warriors. This was very wrong. It was not like Chu Xiu had never seen an expert in the true fire cultivation realm. Whether it was a martial Dao master or a true fire cultivation realm, they were ultimately only in the first level of the martial Dao realm. However, Immortal Lord Luo seemed to think of himself as a superior existence. This did not seem to be because of his strength, but because of his background. In Immortal Lord Luo's eyes, he seemed to represent the heavens and regarded people outside of divine gates as ants. Chu Xiu did not know whether Immortal Lord Luo's mentality was weird or if all the warriors from divine gates were like this. If it was the latter, then divine gates was a very terrifying force. They were simply a group of paranoid lunatics. If it were Chu Xiu doing such a thing, he would not put in as much effort as Immortal Lord Luo and even attack Guan Xiu. He simply said that if she did not hand over Chu Kuanga's mausoleum, he would kill everyone in the Guanzhong torture room and bring them in front of Guan Xiu to be killed one by one. He guaranteed that Guan Xiu would be forced to agree before he killed more than 10 people. Of course, he could attack Guan Xiu first. The strongest had already been eliminated, let alone the others. It was just a little more effort. However, no matter how much effort Immortal Lord Luo put in, Guan Xiu would not be able to withstand more than a few moves from him. In the realm, Guan Xiu performed the divine power of the 9 transformations continuously, but it was still useless. Seeing that the realm was getting tighter, Guan Xiu roared in anger. Countless blood qi erupted around her and the divine power of the 9 transformations merged into one. It was an extremely pure power that coiled around Guan Xiu. It was as red as blood and its power was extremely strong. Guan Xiu took a deep look in front of her. However, she was not looking at Immortal Lord Luo, but at Mei Qinglian. The next moment, the power transformed into a giant blade that was as red as blood and slashed at Immortal Lord Luo. Immortal Lord Luo frowned. Then he pinched it gently. In an instant, the blood mist dissipated. In the realm, Guan Xiu's figure had already disappeared, leaving behind only a fine blood mist. However, it was like dust that had completely dissipated. Everyone present was stunned as they looked at everything in a daze. Guan Xiu had died. She had died so easily that no one could believe their eyes. Chu Xiu sighed in his heart. Immortal Lord Luo's matter was the truth that had led to the drastic change in the Guanzhong torture room. His exposure was actually an accident. If he had not existed, Guan Siyu in the original plot would probably have made the same choice. Immortal Lord Luo looked at the warriors from the Guanzhong torture room and said, "Now, can anyone tell me where Chu Kuang's tomb is? I'll fight it out with you." A few warriors from the Guanzhong torture room stood up and roared angrily as they charged at Immortal Lord Luo. However, Immortal Lord Luo merely moved his fingers gently and the few of them exploded into a blood mist. The difference between their realms was too great. To Immortal Lord Luo, killing these people was really no different from stepping on a few ants. Immortal Lord Luo pointed at one person and said, "You, tell me, where is Chu Kuang's tomb?" The man gritted his teeth and struggled to decide whether he should say it or not. If he said it, he could save his life, but he would definitely be despised by everyone. Even he himself would not be able to overcome this obstacle. However, seeing that the martial artist was hesitating, Sir God Luo pointed with his finger and the martial artist immediately exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Everyone shuddered at the sight of it. Just as Immortal Lord Luo turned to look at another person, that person quickly shouted, "I'll tell you. I know where Chu Kuang's tomb is. It's in the basement of the back hall. The tomb of all the past hall masters of the Guanzhong torture room who died in the torture hall is there." Immortal Lord Luo muttered, "Why didn't you say so earlier? Why waste time?" Immortal Lord Luo suddenly took a step forward and a powerful force seeped into the ground. Everywhere it passed, the ground cracked and revealed the basement of the back hall. After the warrior pointed at Chu Kuang's coffin, Immortal Lord Luo opened the coffin and took out the secret space box and some funerary objects. Because Chu Kuang was a thrifty person, there were not many funerary objects. They were just his personal belongings. Immortal Lord Luo opened the secret space box and laughed when he saw what was inside. He had been looking for it for decades and he had finally found it. The last time he failed, he was mocked by the other divine generals in the divine gates for a long time. This time, things were finally settled. The other warriors of the Guanzhong torture room glared at Immortal Lord Luo and wanted to swallow him alive. The underground palace where the past hall masters of the Guanzhong torture room were buried was opened. Immortal Lord Luo's action was like digging up someone's ancestral grave. At that moment, the warrior who led the way heaved a sigh of relief. Now that he had found what he wanted, he could live, right? However, before he could react, Emperor Luo moved his hand and the martial artist exploded into a cloud of blood mist in an instant. Immortal Lord Luo said faintly, "I forgot to mention that I hate traitors too." Seeing that, some of the warriors who were not strong-willed cursed in their hearts. This man was a lunatic. Stubbornness meant that he didn't know how to appreciate favors and was stubborn. In the end, he agreed to it and became a traitor. Anyway, he was going to die anyway. Was he going to be reasonable? After getting what he wanted, Immortal Lord Luo glanced at Chu Xiu and Mei Qinglian. However, he only smiled mysteriously. He took a step forward and disappeared. He had seen Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian, and the messy things that happened in the Guanzhong torture room from the outside. Immortal Lord Luo couldn't be bothered with the grudges and intrigues between the ants. When he was in a good mood, he might watch the show for a while. However, he was pressed for time to leave the divine gates, and he didn't even have time to watch the show. Chapter 631. Although Divine Lord Luo had left, the drama of the Guanzhong torture room had yet to come to an end. With Guan Siyu dead, who should be in charge of the Guanzhong torture room? If not for Chu Xiu, according to the original trajectory, the person who would be in charge of the Guanzhong torture room after Guan Siyu's death should have been Great Leader and Liaonian. In the Guanzhong torture room, only his seniority and prestige could temporarily suppress the Guanzhong torture room and contend against Mei Qinglian. Now that Liaonian was dead, and Mei Qinglian and Chu Xiu's identities had been exposed, what should they do? Just as the entire place was silent, Chu Xiu's voice suddenly rang out. "Eunuch Qin, since you're here, Don't be in a hurry to leave. Eunuch Chen, who was preparing to retreat with the group of Dragon Riders' Imperial Guards, turned his head. His expression was slightly twisted, and there was fear in it. This time, His Highness the Crown Prince had suffered a great loss. Yang Gongdu was a famous scholar that His Highness the Crown Prince had spent a great deal of effort to invite. Under His Highness the Crown Prince's command, he had indeed increased His Highness the Crown Prince's power by a lot. For example, the group of Dragon Riders' Imperial Guards under their command had been calculated by Yang Gongdu. Otherwise, with the Crown Prince's frequent foolish moves, it would already be good if His Majesty did not hate them, let alone the Dragon Riders' Imperial Guards. But now, Yang Gongdu had died here, and it seemed like even he could not leave. Turning his head to look at Chu Xiu, Eunuch Chen shouted, "Chu Xiu! Don't forget, I belong to His Highness the Crown Prince. I belong to the Eastern Qi Imperial Court." Chu Xiu flashed a smile at Eunuch Chen, as if he was looking at an idiot. Hee. Eunuch Chen was really panicking. At this time he still wanted to use the Crown Prince and the Eastern Qi Imperial Court to pressure Chu Xiu. However, he had forgotten that Chu Xiu had never been afraid of trash like LV Longji from the beginning. It wasn't the first time he had tricked the Crown Prince. Moreover, now that Chu Xiu's identity as a devil had been exposed, he didn't mind being more unscrupulous. Moreover, he had a good relationship with the second prince, LV Longguang. He believed that LV Longguang would be very happy if he got rid of the eunuch and would help him take care of everything. With one step, Chu Xiu instantly appeared in front of Eunuch Chen. Eunuch Chen knew Chu Xiu's strength. Moreover, the current Chu Xiu was 10 times more terrifying than the Chu Xiu he knew before. At that moment, Eunuch Chen began to burn his qi and blood, wanting to make one last attempt. However, as he burned, he realized that his qi and blood were burning more and more vigorously. It was so vigorous that even he couldn't stop it. As Chu Xiu waved his hand, the blood mist scattered. Under Chu Xiu's demonic blood technique, Eunuch Chen directly burned up all the essence and blood in his body. He turned into a dried corpse and fell to the ground. The Dragon Riders behind Eunuch Chen all revealed expressions of fear, but not a single one of them fled. They still gripped their weapons tightly in their hands and faced Chu Xiu. It had to be said that as a force that belonged exclusively to the Eastern Qi Imperial family, the Dragon Riders' loyalty was very high, not to mention their own strength. People like Chu Xiu's father, who had betrayed the Dragon Riders' Imperial army in the face of treasures and betrayed their brothers, were in the minority. Glancing at these people, Chu Xiu did not kill them. He only took out a token and said in a low voice, "Everyone, the Crown Prince's people are already dead. You Dragon Riders' Imperial army are only loyal to the Imperial family, not to the Crown Prince. A wise man submits to circumstances. For you Dragon Riders' Imperial army, there is no difference between obeying the second prince and obeying the Crown Prince." The token Chu Xiu took out belonged to the second prince. Back then, the second prince wanted to recruit Chu Xiu, but Chu Xiu did not agree. However, because Chu Xiu had helped the second prince trick the Crown Prince, the second prince naturally wanted to form a good relationship with Chu Xiu. This token was given to Chu Xiu by the second prince. In reality, other than representing the second prince's identity, this thing did not have much use. It could not mobilize the army, nor could it mobilize the forces under the second prince. This was because they did not recognize the token, but the person. However, in this situation, this token was just right. The Dragon Riders' Imperial army looked at each other, then cupped their hands towards Chu Xiu and said, "Greetings, Your Excellency." It was true that the Dragon Riders' Imperial army was loyal to the Imperial family, but this did not mean that they were idiots. If they could avoid death, then it was naturally better not to. At this moment, since Chu Xiu had the second prince's token, and they had all heard that Chu Xiu was related to the second prince, it was not a big deal for them to temporarily listen to Chu Xiu's orders. As for whether or not the Crown Prince would cause trouble for them afterwards, the Dragon Riders' Imperial army was not worried at all. The Dragon Riders' Imperial army's true backer was the Emperor of Eastern Qi. As long as they did not betray the Eastern Qi Imperial family, it did not matter whose orders they listened to. The Dragon Riders' imperial army had no position in the struggle for the throne. This was something that everyone in Eastern Qi knew. The heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand slashed at the formation plate imprisoning Mei Qinglian, producing a loud clang. After slashing at it more than 10 times, the formation plate finally could not take it anymore and finally dissipated. Exchanging a glance with Mei Qinglian, Chu Xiu said to the stewards of the Dragon Riders' imperial army in a deep voice, "I will have to trouble you to guard the main entrance of the torture chamber. Without my permission, no one is allowed to take a single step out. Once the matter of the Guanzhong torture room is over, I will send a letter to the second prince and ask for your rewards on your behalf." The stewards of the Dragon Riders' imperial army looked at each other and nodded. They immediately followed Chu Xiu's instructions and began to seal off the Guanzhong torture room headquarters. Today's events were a little bizarre. They had followed the Crown Prince's men to cause trouble for Chu Xiu, but now, because of the second prince, they had to listen to Chu Xiu's orders. But no matter who they listened to, as long as Chu Xiu did not harm the interests of Eastern Qi, everything would be fine. Moreover, with Yang Gongdu's death, the Crown Prince did not seem to be in a good situation. At this time, it was not a big deal for them to slightly lean towards the second prince. But when the people in the Guanzhong torture room heard Chu Xiu's orders, their expressions changed drastically. Fang Sha shouted, "Chu Xiu, what are you trying to do? Do you think that with Hall Master Guan's death, you can take over the entire Guanzhong torture room? In your dreams?" Chu Xiu turned to look at Fang Sha and said calmly, "It is precisely because of Hall Master Guan's death that I have to temporarily stabilize the situation in the Guanzhong torture room. Moreover, Hall Master Guan did not strip me of my position as the torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room even before his death. So, I am still one of the 4 torture officers. As for you, Leader Fang, as the head of the arrest department, you have colluded with outsiders to cause trouble in the Guanzhong torture room. The one who should be killed is you." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu moved. The heavenly demon dance in his hands surged with demonic aura and slashed at Fang Sha with a powerful force. Xiao Yi and the other torture officers in the Guanzhong torture room looked conflicted, but no one made a move. Chu Xiu spoke in a dignified manner. Although Guanxiu did not strip him of his position as torture officer, if Divine Lord Luo had not suddenly intervened, Guanxiu would have killed Chu Xiu with a slap. How could he have the chance to flaunt his power here? However, just like when Divine Lord Luo had attacked earlier, absolute power represented everything. At present, Divine Lord Luo, who was the most powerful, had left. Yang Gongdu and Eunuch Chen had suffered a crushing defeat. The remaining Dragon Riders had even become Chu Xiu's accomplices. Therefore, even if Mei Qinglian was not included, Chu Xiu was the most powerful person in the Guanzhong torture room. Although Chu Xiu was not a martial Dao master, in the eyes of the crowd, Fang Sha was the one at a disadvantage when he was fighting Fang Sha. When they thought of Chu Xiu's identity as Lin Yi, how many martial Dao masters had died in Chu Xiu's hands? Just thinking about it sent chills down their spines. Fang Sha gritted his teeth and retreated hastily. As a martial Dao master, it was indeed embarrassing for him to choose to retreat instead of attacking a junior martial artist like Chu Xiu. He had seen the fight between Guanxiu and Chu Xiu just now. With the power that he possessed, he was indeed no match for him. However, how could Chu Xiu let him leave so easily? Now that Guanxiu was dead and the Guanzhong torture room was without a leader, wasn't it the best time to take over the Guanzhong torture room? Although Chu Xiu did not plan to take action so soon, he wanted to at least wait until he had an absolute advantage in the Guanzhong torture room. However, he did not expect such an accident to happen. Although the situation was a little rushed, the most troublesome person, Guanxiu, was already dead. If he did not take action now to stabilize the situation, when would he do so? Looking in the direction that Fang Sha fled, Chu Xiu did not chase after him. Instead, he used his primordial spirit as a bow and his mind as the string to shoot a soul-destroying arrow that carried a terrifying aura. Invisible mental strength condensed into an arrow and shot out. It arrived behind Fang Sha almost instantly. The crimson qi around Fang Sha erupted. He actually chose to burn his blood essence to resist Chu Xiu's soul-destroying arrow. He was extremely decisive. Although the soul-destroying arrow's majestic qi and blood power was offset by most of its power, it still made Fang Sha groan and feel a sharp pain in his head. However, before he could react, Chu Xiu's figure had already appeared in front of him. He performed the formless sealing handprint, and life and death were all in his palm. The huge handprint suddenly descended. Everywhere it passed, the qi of heaven and earth was twisted and killed by the handprint. Fang Sha's qi and blood condensed around him. Using his qi and blood as a guide, he performed the annihilating heaven and earth obliterating selfless killing fist to meet the huge handprint. However, he was still forced back step by step, and large amounts of blood flowed out. Before he could react, a resplendent saber gleam appeared in front of him. It contained boundless hatred and triggered the mental demons in his body. This was not the hatred saber. Instead, it was Chu Xiu's demonic dance. It simulated the power of the hatred saber that could affect one's emotions. Because it was Chu Xiu himself, although it was not as powerful as the real hatred saber, it would not cause a backlash. As the saber slashed down, Fang Sha's eyes instantly turned crimson. He hated Guan Xiu for being infatuated with Mei Qinglian. He also hated Yang Gongdu for using him. He hated Chu Xiu, who wanted to kill him. However, the stronger his hatred, the greater the power of Chu Xiu's saber. When Fang Sha lost all reason and charged crazily towards Chu Xiu's saber, he realized that something was wrong. However, it was already too late. The saber fell, and Fang Sha's head flew into the sky. He no longer had the chance to hate. Chapter 632. With Fang Sha dead, the situation was set for the time being. All three martial arts grandmasters in the Guanzhong torture room had fallen. It could be said that Chu Xiu was now the strongest person in the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu looked back at Xiao Yi and the others and said calmly, "Now that the Guanzhong torture room has suffered a great change, please rest in the main hall for the time being and don't leave. In 3 days, we will have a meeting in the main hall to discuss the future of the Guanzhong torture room." Whether it was Yin Batong, who had a grudge against Chu Xiu, or Chu Simo, who had sided with Chu Xiu before, none of them said anything. Instead, it was Xiao Yi who said in a low voice, "Chu Xiu, do you want to annex the Guanzhong torture room and become the new hall master?" With all due respect, although Hall Master Guan is dead, even if we all agree, you can't really control the Guanzhong torture room. There are too many loopholes in your identity. Even if we don't spread the news, Yang Gongdu has already left evidence in Eastern Qi's crown prince. When it is announced to the Jianghu, your identity will be completely exposed. If you were only Chu Xiu and not Lin Yi, the hero of diabolism, then with your reputation and status in the Guanzhong torture room, it won't be a problem for you to take over the position of hall master. But after your identity is exposed, the Guanzhong torture room will not allow a guy from diabolism to become the new hall master. Even if we stand on your side, it will be useless. The others can just leave the Guanzhong torture room. So if you force it, all you will get is a broken Guanzhong torture room. Without these low-level arresters, it will be useless to force the torturers to stay. Xiao Yi smiled bitterly. He had no intention of deceiving Chu Xiu. He was just telling the truth. Speaking of which, it was time for the torturers to discuss where they should go. If Chu Xiu became the new hall master, they would not object, nor would they dare to object. But in that case, as he said, the Guanzhong torture room would completely fall apart. Chu Xiu casually waved his hand and said, "There is no need for Lord Xiao to worry about this. I have my own plans." Xiao Yi and the others had no choice but to follow Chu Xiu's instructions and stay in the Guanzhong torture room with their subordinates, waiting to see how things would change. After temporarily taking control of the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu immediately sent people to Guanxi and gathered all his men in Guanxi to the headquarters. In the end, the Imperial Dragon Riders were outsiders, and their strength was a bit lacking. On the other hand, Chu Xiu's men in Guanxi were his trusted aides. Even though Chu Xiu's identity had been exposed, he believed that the Ghost Hand King and the others would not mind joining the demonic path with him. After dealing with these matters in an orderly manner, Chu Xiu went to Mei Qinglian's room to discuss the follow-up matters. Ever since Guan Xiyu's death, Mei Qinglian had been a little distracted. The impact of this matter on her was too great. Seeing Mei Qinglian like this, Chu Xiu walked over and said, "Are you still sad about Hall Master Guan's death, Lady Saintess?" Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "I can't say that I'm sad. I just feel a little complicated. After all, in the end, Guan Xiu did not betray me." Chu Xiu also sighed and said, "Although our identities and goals are destined to oppose Hall Master Guan, I have to say that Hall Master Guan is still very admirable in some aspects. Now that he died in the hands of Divine Lord Luo, its karma passed down from the previous generation. In fact, this is also a good thing. It's better than having a life and death battle with us." Chu Xiu was not hypocritical when he said this. This time he was telling the truth. Although Guan Xiu was dead, he did have a clear conscience. As a man, even though he knew that Mei Qinglian was the devil demon sex saintess, he still chose to protect Mei Qinglian. It was just that the price was to let Chu Xiu die first. And as the torture hall master, he did not choose to rely on Eastern Qi because of his own reasons. He still chose to maintain the independence of the Guanzhong torture room. In fact, Guan Xiyu's choice to rely on Eastern Qi was a very good choice for him. After all, the Eastern Qi Imperial Court was the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Although the power of the court was different from that of Jianghu, once they gathered together, it was a very terrifying thing. Relying on the Eastern Qi Imperial Court was equivalent to Guan Xiu having a big backer. Perhaps even Divine Lord Luo could be stopped. At least he did not have to die. He could even make the Guanzhong torture room his private property and pass it on to his children or disciples. But at the moment of life and death, Guan Xiu could clearly retreat, but he still chose to fight. He did not let down Chu Kuang's kindness in training him. Although Chu Xiu stood on the opposite side of Guan Xiu, he could not help but admire Guan Xiu. When he spoke, he still addressed Guan Xiu as Hall Master. For some people, some things were worth protecting with everything they had, even if they had to risk their lives for it. Chu Xiu did not know if he was such a person. Anyway, there was nothing for him to risk his life for now. On the contrary, Chu Xiu cherished his life very much. Only when he was alive could everything be possible. If he was dead, everything would naturally be in vain. At this time, Mei Qinglian stood up. She swept away her previous confusion and said in a low voice, "Given the current situation of the Guanzhong torture room, what do you want to do?" Xiao Yi is right. When Eastern Qi reveals our identities, 80% of the people in the Guanzhong torture room will not agree to let you be the hall master. Even if you threaten them with force, they will directly leave the Guanzhong torture room. In the end, the entire Guanzhong torture room will fall apart. It will be useless for you to get an empty shell. Mei Qinglian was not a little girl who would be trapped by love. She was the holy virgin of the Yin demon sect and also a martial arts grand master of the Yin Ma clan. At this time, she had put away those complicated emotions and temporarily faced the situation in front of her. The real value of the Guanzhong torture room did not lie in its name, but in the large number of Jianghu constables and secret agents of the Guanzhong torture room. Although these people were usually inconspicuous, they were the core strength of the entire Guanzhong torture room. It could be said that other than Guan Xiu, the hall master, the other so-called leaders of the arrest division, torture officers, and patrol officers could be eliminated, but the large number of martial artists of the Guanzhong torture room at the bottom could not be eliminated. Therefore, the first problem in front of Chu Xiu was, how could they control the Guanzhong torture room? Chu Xiu asked in return, "Who said I want to be the hall master?" Mei Qinglian was stunned. Did Chu Xiu want to give up the hall master position? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I know what Xiaoyi said. I know how high my position in the Guanzhong torture room is. I also know that forcibly taking the hall master position is not upright, and it will indeed cause a lot of trouble. What we want is the entire Guanzhong torture room, not the so-called hall master reputation. Therefore, as long as we can control the Hall Master, what difference is there from controlling the Guanzhong torture room? Mei Qinglian's eyes lit up. You mean to find a puppet to be the Hall Master, and then we just need to control that puppet? But then Mei Qinglian frowned and said, but this puppet is also very difficult to find. Right now, there is no one in the Guanzhong torture room who is qualified for this position. Xiao Yi, Chu Simo, Si Ming, and the others have enough seniority, but not enough prestige. Actually, if your identity is not exposed, you are the most suitable person to be the Hall Master. Unfortunately, there is no suitable person now. At this moment, a strange expression appeared on Chu Xiu's face. He said, actually, the position of Hall Master does not require strength. If someone is too strong, we won't be able to control them. What we need is someone who is qualified to inherit the Hall Master position. At least in terms of status, no one can stop him from becoming the Hall Master. And coincidentally, there is such a person in the Guanzhong torture room. Mei Qinglian frowned and said, who are you talking about? Chu Xiu pointed outside and said, of course it's the former Hall Master Chu Kuang's only son, Chu Yuanqing. If he becomes the Hall Master, who in the entire Guanzhong torture room would dare to say no? When Mei Qinglian heard this, her eyes immediately lit up. The person Chu Xiu chose was indeed very clever. In the entire Guanzhong torture room, there was indeed no one more suitable than Chu Yuanqing for this position. Even when Chu Kuanga was on the verge of death, with his prestige in the Guanzhong torture room, if he forcefully pushed for Chu Yuanqing to become the Hall Master, no one in the Guanzhong torture room would object. Guan Xiu would even be willing to help Chu Yuanqing secure this position. However, Chu Kuanga was truly selfless. He knew that his son was not suited to be a Hall Master. It would be difficult for him to even become a patrol inspector. That was why he stood his ground and gave the position of Hall Master to Guan Xiu. Mei Qinglian frowned and said, but, will Chu Yuanqing agree to your request? I know Chu Yuanqing quite well. Although he can't even compare to a 10,000th of his father, and is very disappointing, he is not a cowardly person who is afraid of death. If you force him into a corner, he will fight to the death with you. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Saintess, you underestimate me. In the past, Chu Yuanqing was my benefactor who brought me into the Guanzhong torture room. Why would I threaten him? Don't worry, leave this matter to me. You need to contact Senior Wei as soon as possible and ask him or Senior Chu Wuji to come over. The real danger of the Guanzhong torture room is yet to come. If we don't handle this matter well, even if we successfully control the Guanzhong torture room, we won't be able to hold on for long. Mei Qinglian was puzzled and asked, handle what matter well? Chu Xiu touched his nose and said, it's mainly about me. I used the identity of Lin Yi to kill a lot of people and caused a lot of trouble. There are countless karmic ties. When my identity is exposed, you can imagine how those people will react. Therefore, we need to think of a way to deal with it in advance. Chu Xiu was also very helpless at this moment. This was the price of attracting too much hatred. Sooner or later, he would have to pay for it. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.